Okay. Hello, hello, hello. Wonder if I'm coming through clear. Alrighty, so let's see here. All right, guys, if you're on IG, I'm also going to be on YouTube. In fact, I'm live on YouTube right now, so feel free to check that out. I'm going to be showing some videos and doing some reaction to some videos on YouTube. So if you care to see it, then go on over to that. But while I'm over here on IG, I just wanted to let you guys know that I do have the subscription option on my IG. Right now, it's at $4 or something like that, but I'm going to be bringing that down to 99 cents. I actually got this idea from Blanche Robinson. I think it's a brilliant idea. The fact of the matter is, I do a lot of research. I do spend a lot of time and energy researching and exploring all of these different preconceived and prevailing narratives, and just trying to see if there's any truth to a lot of the things that we've been told in our schools. And it takes time, takes effort to do that. And your support helps me to keep going, to keep my social media accounts active, to spend the time needed to put stuff together, so on and so forth. So if you feel so obliged, I do invite you all to subscribe to my YouTube channel, or not my YouTube, but basically, well, yeah, YouTube too, but also my IG. It's going to be 99 cent after today, so be on the lookout for that. Right now it's $4, but again, I'm going to be bringing that down. Not a whole lot of people right now on YouTube, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. So anyway, I posted a video yesterday on IG, and I posted it, but I was kind of iffy as to whether I should post it, because I don't think I actually made the point I wanted to make as eloquently as I could have. If you're on YouTube, I'm going to be playing it back. You guys over on IG, y'all won't be able to see it, but you will be able to hear it. So I'm going to go ahead and post my YouTube. All right. So this is the video that I posted. It was in response to a docu-series that PBS just put out. And here is what was said, and here's how I responded. Let me know in the comment section if you can't hear it.
What does black joy mean to you?
Black joy means being in a safe space and feeling free, where you can really be yourself and shed that skin.
Wherever you have a large concentration of African Americans, you have business districts that rise up, that meet the needs in these communities.
So that's what was said, and here's how I responded.
Alone.
So 2 things stick out to me about what we just saw. One, when he asked, what is black joy? There is no such thing as black joy. There's joy or there's no joy. Another thing, so that part I stand by 100%. I wouldn't change anything with that in particular. But here's how I responded to when the lady said, whenever you have a lot of black people together, you have businesses, you have, success and all these things. Here's how I responded to that in particular. That I think is interesting about this is how the woman says that whenever black people are in one concentrated place, you have business districts, you have all this success. If that's the case, then what happened to Baltimore? If that's the case, then what happened to Detroit or any of these other inner cities where you have so-called food deserts, where you have able-bodied people standing on the corner doing absolutely nothing? If it's true what you're saying, I'm just going to give it to you. If it's true what you're saying, that when you have a lot of black people in a concentrated area, you have all this success, then please explain to me south side of Chicago. Please explain to me all of these places. It's important to note that she's talking about this in the present tense. She's talking about this as though this is what happens right now when Black people are in a concentrated area. But the footage that they're actually showing you is what happened back then as a result of their Christian ethic. And the collapse, ironically, of these thriving communities happened whenever people began to insist on their Blackness. Say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud. Black is beautiful, Black this, Black everything. It's whenever we began to take the onus and the responsibility off of ourselves to be people of integrity as a manifestation of our Christian faith. That's when we saw the collapse of our communities. Blackness is a new religion. And whenever you make Blackness your religion, you're going to get confusion. You're going to get chaos. You're going to get crime. You're going to get all these things. Now, so that's what I said. Now, I wouldn't change the sentiment behind what I said. I would only change how I said it. So what the lady is insinuating when she said, when you have all these Black people together in this one spot, you get all these business districts, you get all the success. What she's insinuating when she says that is that the thing that causes that success is their Blackness, is the color of their skin. And I push back against that, because if that's true, then how do you account for the success of Irish communities, of Jewish communities, of Italian communities, of Asian communities, of, Nigerians who come to this country, so on and so forth? How do you account for the success of all of these different pigmentations of people if the thing that causes success for Black neighborhoods is merely their skin color? Because I call BS on that, I'm saying that the thing that causes success for any given community, regardless of what their skin color is their values or the lack thereof. If you don't have values, your community will not be successful. If you do have values, your community will be successful, right? And so the common denominator for a successful community is values or the lack thereof. It has nothing to do with skin color. But because PBS is trying to trick people, is trying to fool people into going along with a narrative that's pushing Blackness as a religion, you'll see them constantly producing documentaries like this, television shows like this, that is trying to get people to worship themselves, right? And it's the very same thing that Satan did whenever he approached Eve in the Garden of Eden. He said that you won't really die. God just knows that to the extent that you eat the fruit, you'll become a God yourself, right? You'll get to choose for yourself what is good and evil, right? He tried to get her to believe that she can be a God. He tried to get her to worship herself, right? And so that's exactly what this modern culture, this modern agenda is trying to get us to do. It's been the same thing since the Garden of Eden, trying to get us to engage and indulge in self-worship, right? Because to the extent that you worship yourself, even though, as the Bible says, your heart is the most wicked among all things, nobody can understand it, that there's a way that seems right to a man, but its end is death. Like, we are warned about ourselves. We are warned about our calamity. We are warned about the fact that we are sinners. And not only are we warned, we're given the solution. God loved us enough to give us the solution. He loved us enough to send his only begotten son to die for us, to first minister to us, to die for us, and then he rose again, right? This is what God, who loved us, did for us, right? And that's a free gift for all of us. You know what I mean? It's yours for the taking. But it requires something of you. It requires you to die to yourself. It requires humility from you. It requires coming to the revelation that you are not a God, that you are not to be worshipped, right? That's a very surreal thing to come to terms with. Satan wants to convince you that you're a God and that you should worship nobody but yourself. And God wants to communicate to you that all of your striving, everything that you do, all the weights you lift, all the makeup you put on, all the money you make, the car you drive, the house you try to attain, all of these things are not enough. It will not square you with God. It will not get you into paradise. It will not give you eternal life, right? All of the self-help books you read, all of the different things, you're constantly letting yourself down. You're constantly disappointing yourself and are being disappointed. Nothing you will ever do will ever be enough. And so whenever Jesus comes along, he says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light, right? He takes our burden from us. He took it on the cross. And, that just kind of gives me chills thinking about that. And I'm not here to preach to anybody today, but it's important to make that point. Because whenever PBS puts out documentaries or docu-series like the one that they just put out called Making Black America, they're trying to embody that excellence that our forefathers and our foremothers experienced and implemented. They're trying to embody that in skin color when it had little to do with skin color and everything to do with values that were the implementation and manifestation of their Christian faith. Their Christian faith was a common denominator, not their skin color. So that's the point that I wanted to make. I feel like I could have made it stronger, and I don't think I did, but here you go. So I'm going to bring in Chuck Littleton. You know him on Instagram as Teach 'em Chuck. Very, very, very bright dude from Baltimore. And I don't know if I offended Mr. Chuck because I specifically called out Baltimore in that video, but let's get his comments on it. How are you, Chuck?
What's going on, man? What's going on, man? I'm from Detroit. I know that's what you meant to say.
Detroit.
I know that's what you meant to say.
Same difference.
I know. Yeah. Pretty much. I mean, you take away the row houses and Baltimore, you kind of can hear the twang. They got that unique accent.
Right.
But aside from that, man, it ain't much difference. I can tell you that.
Right. Now, I almost called you Detroit. Chuck, help me out. I'm missing the top of your head, so if you don't mind.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, we're running a professional production over here. I need you to.
I'm not a professional filmmaker, brother. I'm just a guy with a webcam built into a laptop, so I don't really.
Now everybody
do it.
Everybody on IG. I'm talking to Teach 'em Chuck. You can follow him on IG at teach_em_Chuck. But if you want to actually watch him on camera, you can.
Did you want me to join? I could join you on IG too if you want to bring me in. It's up to you. I mean,
how would I do?
We can do it. Like if I request to join.
That's actually not a bad idea.
It's up to you.
I'm just trying to figure out the audio. Did I bring my AirPods?
Yeah.
Because I mean, if I were to bring you on, then everybody on IG will get an echo.
Okay. Nah, we good.
So yeah, they're just going to watch it on YouTube or just hang out on IG. All right, so let me see here. Let me. There's that, and then. Okay, cool. We're a professional production. All right, so what were your thoughts on that video that I shared just a moment ago?
Wow, man. I mean, you said that you felt as though you could have said it a little bit better. I mean, you just kind of went into further detail, but I thought you did a good job just speaking on it initially. We talked about this, I think, last time when we went live, the whole issue of blackness and this sort of belief that black culture is kind of racial idolatry. When I heard the quote, because sometimes you can extract more meaning based upon what isn't said versus what is said, because I don't know who that was narrating or whoever that was speaking, but they said that when you had when blacks come together, you have this black joy or something like that, and then all of a sudden you see this flourishing of black people when they are in fact together. So I'm saying to myself, well, wait a minute. So are you suggesting that all it takes is a group, a kind of a black collective, and through some sort of unconscious, unarticulated osmosis, that there's this this uprising? How does that happen? Because see, we could talk about blacks as a collective, but no matter what sort of group that you are in fact describing or making reference to, the minority, or should I say the individual, is the ultimate minority, and a group is but merely a collection of individuals. And so in order to have the kind of success that she is talking about, it speaks to what you said about, of course, individuals sort of fostering certain qualities, of course, that are commensurate with success as we understand success in a free society. And so being a part of a group and talking about black joy and this, that, and the third has nothing at all to do with success. One of the things that I believe is that, and I also too, I think about when I hear so-called black, black commentators, when they talk about the black community or when they talk about black culture, they always talk about blacks in terms of what we need to do. We. But we, in essence, is nobody, because the we does not act. Only the individual can engage in a rational act, because to say we is to say nothing at all, because you as an individual, if you're constantly harping on the we, of course, is not you.
Right.
You are simply waiting on someone else, of course, to do something on your behalf. And what tends to happen is the people who are doing things on your behalf are, of course, always your demagogues, your politicians, et cetera, speaking up on behalf of what they think you need. And of course, when they confiscate the tangible property of others and reallocate it to you, of course, it always, once they take their cut, of course, because they are the expert class. And then, of course, when it inevitably goes awry, like it always does, because that does not make for a healthy society, then they can always blame those outside of your perceived group for having sabotaged your collective efforts.
Yep.
So because the blame is always on someone else. It's not you or the people who claim to represent you. They always have the scapegoat because they blame white society
Yep.
or the system of white supremacy, et cetera, for why their approach toward sort of rehabilitating, or for the want of a better word, a particular situation, why it doesn't happen the way they prophesize. Because the reality is that human beings in society, quite frankly, just don't function in that way.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
Yeah.
once again, it kind of speaks to the whole attitude about, because what they essentially become, because see, whether we're talking about the groups or we're talking about individual people, big, large groups, small groups, if there is going to be any sort of movement here, there, anywhere, then somebody within the group, once again, has to take initiative to execute the plan. And so
Right.
when I hear a lot of these race hucksters and demagogues always talking all this sort of crazy stuff about black this and economic solidarity and how we need to do this and how we need to sort of do that. And I always say to myself, well, wait a minute. So are you trying to say that you are better suited to make decisions for me than I myself? I in fact know what's best for me.
Right.
You don't,
Right.
right?
Right.
But of course, you claim that because that's the only way that we can have, because a hive mind is a stagnant mind,
Right.
right? Because, it is, in fact, this kind of initiative and risk taking and these other things that, of course, propels a society forward. And when everyone is sort of all sitting around waiting for the planner, in fact, to tell them what to do, there is in fact no movement. You brought up too, and I'm gonna pass it back to you, Chad. You brought up, like, for example, I was writing down as you were speaking. You were talking about Italian. You brought up Italians. You brought up the Irish. And one thing of note to consider, and I'm sure you know this, is when you look at, for example, like Irish Americans, Italian Americans, Irish Americans wallowed in kind of poverty, and they were sort of behind the eight ball when it came to a lot of the social factors and variables. We look at when we measure quality of life. The Irish kind of lagged behind for a very, very long time. Why? Because the Irish were very, very politically active from the time that they first arrived in the United States. And so what we look at when we look at the Irish community, we look at the Italian community, they were very prevalent in American politics from the beginning, and their sort of economic rise happened a lot slower because once again, the Irish placed emphasis on politics and political action and political activism, as opposed to allowing themselves, sort of like we talked about last time when it came to racial attitudes and how different folks, different groups in the society, we get along. You said familiarity is, and in the way, what breeds familiarity is, of course, market cooperation, right? Voluntary association, right? And when you don't have that, when you substitute voluntary market cooperation with state coercion, all that does is, of course, it breeds resentment and contempt.
100%, 100%. And even to the extent that you had Irish coming to the United States and Italians, there were even different subsects within those so-called communities that basically pursued success in different ways. And so even though you may have had a subsect of the Irish who were pursuing success by means of the ballot box, you had others within that same people group who were pursuing success by means of the plow. And so, it's these are important things to note. As somebody who we both look up to, Thomas Sowell points out. I'm getting a request on IG. I'm going to bring in this person real quick. Make it quick. If you have a question or comment, so we can keep it moving along. Let's see here. Hey, you there? Hello? Hello, hello. All right, well, that person's not responding, so...
Stephen Mills.
Yeah.
I got you up on my IG on my phone right now. Send me something.
Oh, there you are. All right, so what's your comment or question, Stephen? Hey, what's up?
I didn't have one. I'm listening. I'm enjoying you guys talking and appreciate it deeply.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Stephen.
God bless.
Yes, sir.
Right. So we got one more person. Come on. I swear technology does not like me at all. All right, I'm just going to keep it moving. All right, so you put me in a situation where I almost had to throw my phone away earlier in the week, Chuck. You sent me the most abysmal video that I've ever seen in my life. I wasted 13 minutes of my life watching this video.
I'm sorry, I had to do it to you, bro. I said, I gotta send this to my boy Chad. As soon as I see you talking about the Jennifer Lewis,
yeah, exactly.
Know what you're talking about?
Yep.
I had to show you, man.
As all of you know, today is election day around the country, and it's so interesting watching all of the stunts that are pulled by Democrats to try to get people out to the polls and vote. If I were to address every single one of those stunts, then obviously this will be a 13-hour video and it'll go well past the election tonight. But we can only cover a small few. And I think this Jennifer Lewis, you said it was her name?
Yeah, Jennifer Lewis.
I think Jennifer Lewis, she kind of takes the cake because she embodies the political chicanery and the circusness that is American politics today. And let me just say it's not just on the Democrat side; it's also on the Republican side too. Because what I've come to realize, and I'm sorry if this is going to offend some people who are watching right now, because I would imagine that most people who are watching fancy themselves to be Republicans or conservatives or informative voters, and so if this is not you, then hey, God bless. But if it is, maybe really consider this. It's interesting to me how a lot of Republicans feel that all of their frustrations, all of the evils that have gone on in this country is embodied in the Democrat Party. I'm going to say that again. It's interesting to me how a lot of Republicans, I would venture to say most Republicans, most flag-waving Republicans, feel that all of their frustrations and all of the evils that are going on in this country is embodied in the Democrat Party. Now, what am I saying? Are we intellectually honest enough to have this conversation? What I am not saying, and what some of you will probably hear me say, or think I'm saying, is that the Democrat Party isn't that bad. But if that's the conclusion you're coming to, you're being intellectually dishonest, and this conversation isn't for you. What I'm actually saying is that the Democrat Party is the least of your problems. Because in this world that we live in, that's downstream of this kind of Machiavellian, political strategy that has gotten uglier and uglier and uglier as time marches on, and you have sinister individuals, the likes of Herbert Marcuse, the likes of Saul Alinsky, the likes of Eric Mann, the likes of Antonio Gramsci and John Dewey, who have figured out that to the extent that they can continually push this word, democracy, 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 it becomes this chant. It becomes this thing that we all, agree with. It's this word that makes us bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. It's this word that is very romantic, and this word that gives you this notion or this idea that I live in the Western world, and therefore I have the ability to assert myself at the ballot box. That's what that word is supposed to invoke. But what these people understood is that all democracy is the will of the people dictating the trajectory of a nation. And so the question becomes, to the extent that we can shape public opinion, we can then drive the will of the people to whatever way we see fit. It's much like the turning of a steering wheel. Which hand grips the turning of the steering wheel drives the trajectory of society. And the fact of the matter is, these people have learned to get at the heads of the institutions, to get into the professions and the careers that disseminate information and shape public opinion. And so to the extent that we live in a democracy, which we don't, by the way, in the United States, we live in a constitutional republic, but to the extent that you think we live in a democracy, right? The fact of the matter is you're trained from a very early age, from pre-K on up into adulthood, to react to a certain pattern of stimuli. You're trained to have a certain set of ideals and values that are more in line with modern secularism than any kind of principles that are rooted in truth and moral upright values. For example, a lot of y'all say that you're a Christian, right? Okay. Not to be legalistic, because I'm far from it. I'm also not licentious in my Christian worldview. I'm neither licentious nor am I legalistic. I believe that the Bible is the inerrant word of God, and I believe that we are sinners, and I believe that the word of God is the final arbitration on all matters, and we should look to it for guidance. We should look to the Holy Spirit, and we should look to the word of God for guidance on how we ought to live, although we will fall short. So I don't think that to the extent that we know we will fall short, we should then throw up our hands and say, I'm not going to abide by it at all. You know what I mean? Like, we know that the word of God is the standard, and to the extent that we fall short, we have a redeemer embodied in Christ that is there to forgive us to the extent that we repent of our sins. Again, not to get too theological or too preachy, but when you look to the example that in the Bible, we learn that, for example, women should dress in a way, right, that's pleasing to God, and not do their hair or to wear such clothes so as to tempt, men. I'm butchering the verse, of course, because I'm paraphrasing. But we do see that in the New Testament that women ought to carry themselves and conduct themselves in a way that's pleasing to God, and not dress in a way that's sexually tempting, right? So a lot of Christian women see that and completely ignore it because they will still wear thong bathing suits to the beach and think that there's nothing wrong with that at all. They'll still carry themselves in a way that's very promiscuous and say that they're a Bible believing Christian at the end of the day. Now, am I judging you? No, I'm not judging you. I'm just saying it's interesting how we play fast and loose with the text, and we're willing to justify certain things because we allow our worldview to be shaped more by the modern culture than by the principles of the scripture, right? So that's something for you to chew on. That's something for you to meditate on. Is my worldview more shaped by the Disney movies I watched growing up, by the favorite songs that are on my Spotify playlist, by whatever the case may be, the lessons that I learned in the public school that I grew up in, the education that I got after I graduated high school and went off to college? Is the way that I see the world, the way that I see myself, the way that I entertain myself, so on and so forth, is that more shaped by this modern, dark and dying culture? Or is it shaped? Am I striving for? Am I content with what the Word of God says in terms of how I ought to live? Does that mean you should become a nun or a monk? No, it doesn't. You can still listen to good music. You can still eat good food. You can still go to the beach and do all the things. But how you carry yourself, right? That is indicative of where your values truly are, where you are truly rooted. The Bible says that you will know a tree by its fruit. You can't claim to be an apple tree if you're not producing apples, right? To use an analogy. So, I forgot even what the point is that I was making. You want to pick it up from there, Chuck?
Man. I mean, you're absolutely right. I think you were sort of getting at, because you started out, you were talking about politics and how a lot of Republicans
Oh
sort
yeah,
of,
yeah. So
that's
just
what
to
we were
finish
talking
that
about.
point,
Go ahead.
it's like I don't know how I got off on the whole principle thing or what have you, but it's like your problem. The Democrat Party is the least of your problems. The fact of the matter is, what these people figured out is that to the extent that they can subvert and co-opt the things that you like, right? These are the people who are literally able to co-opt the church. This is well documented. We talk about it in our documentary, Uncle Tom 2. I talk about it all the time on my IG. There's other people who talk about it too. I think Chuck touched on it on many occasions. Not only that, but they've also infiltrated the Republican Party, right? They're literally playing all ends of this political spectrum. They're literally implanting themselves in all facets of American life and media and entertainment, so on and so forth, journalism, news, education, both primary and secondary, as well as higher education. They're infiltrating all these institutions, and they are basically trying to drive and push a secular way of looking at the world that trickles out and bleeds into every facet of society and the way that you think and the way that you live, to the extent that even though you might call yourself a Christian, even though you might call yourself a believer, even though you might say, go to church every Sunday, you're more likely, once again, to be more influenced, more informed, more shaped, more led by the modern culture than you are of by the faith that you claim to have. And again, it goes back to the Bible saying that you'll know my tree by, you'll know, uh, you'll know my disciples by those who listen to what I say and abide by it. And to the extent that we're not doing that, not necessarily not doing it, but not even wanting to do it, right? We're unapologetic about being more influenced by the culture than we are by the word of God. That is the problem, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think what hit me listening to you speak, and of course I couldn't help but think about the heresy of the social justice gospel, for example, right?
Yeah.
And when I think of Jesus taking up the cross, when I think about Christianity, and Chad, when it comes to sort of biblical matters, or especially like scripture, I would defer to you all day. But what I think of, when I think about Christianity and just biblical morality, the point I gather for me, and it's probably in the Bible somewhere. You may be able to pull out a quote from the Bible for me, but the whole goal, and I think throughout the Bible in many areas, God sort of commands his flock to to love to love him, to rejoice, and to, of course, find happiness and to be happy, because to be happy is in fact a moral command of God, because the alternative is very dark and grim, because life is a burden, and so you must find something in life that is worth the suffering. So when I think of Christianity, I think about finding purpose in that suffering, right? And that's the whole point of living a righteous, living a dignified life. Is not to end the suffering, because the suffering won't end, right? It can end. Suffering won't end. The only way that suffering can end, of course, is through a supernatural divine intervention, which man is not capable of. So the point, of course, in suffering is to find purpose. And so the whole goal of life, because see, when we talk about politics, for example, politics sort of dictates, just in a nutshell, to drive this point home, the whole purpose of politics, of course, is to set laws and regulations. We have all these things, so we have to determine what we as human beings can do in the world. And so what we do as far as our actions to balance out the kind of cognitive or maybe perhaps spiritual dissonance that one may have is that we must act in the physical world in accordance with what we think is moral. And so all questions with respect to how we should live our lives are at its root, or at their root, philosophical question. When I say philosophical, I mean that in the most general sense possible, which I mean it's sort of not so the quality of life is not so much, what can this political party do for you, and what can that political party do for you, and how much money you have, all that kind of stuff. How you should be in the world is, of course, a spiritual question, is an existential question, and everything else. And so the Bible being the base, the foundation of all life, of all understanding, that should in fact inform you as a human being, whether or not you are in fact living a quality life.
Right.
I was, it kind of like this whole question when we talk about, because I've been asked several times, Chad. I don't mean to change the subject, but with a mind like yours, you may take this and run off with it. But people often ask me, we talk about the term like classical liberalism versus liberalism today, because when people think liberalism, they look at so-called liberals, and all of a sudden, we see how radical and extreme the modern American left has become. And so we're like, well, wait a minute. So, when you got some people who like to say, well, I am a classical liberal, right? They say these kinds of things. So, well, what happened between, from the time when classical liberalism was, I guess, a good thing, versus when did this kind of tyrannical form of liberalism, well, how did that happen? And so it goes back to, I think, what you're saying. This is what I gather from what you're saying. When we took the intellectual advancements that were made, I guess, possible by, I guess, for example, like the Enlightenment, right? Like rationalism, the scientific method, and these various things. And I think man became unmoored or unsort of anchored by that biblical tradition. And man, in his hubris, by way of his own sort of addiction, vanity, ego, addiction to his own rationale, his own reasoning, the very concept of liberalism became a euphemism for liberation from suffering.
Yeah.
So when I think, and like, for example, the recent thing that happened, the whole pandemic and everything, right?
Yeah.
Maybe see, well, how is it that so many people can just go off and just believe all these like crazy sort of things and mass, and they're willing to give up their freedoms and all this, all these things. And they said, well, you have to listen to the science, follow the science. But of course, and this is a quote I stole from Dennis Prager, that men do not follow science, men follow wisdom. And how one should live their life, how one should live his life, of course, it's not a scientific question. It is, of course, a philosophical question, because what we as human beings, and this, I think, has a lot to do with we as a people here all across the West not being God-centric any longer. There's some kind of existential crisis happening there, where I think there's an intense fear of death. And I'm not saying death is scary, it's, but I think going back to what I said about the evolution of rationalism or social Darwinism, secular humanism, all these kind of isms that all kind of it may be separate when you start splitting hairs, but in general, right, for the sake of prudence and time, they all sort of mean the same thing in a general sense. And so I think that a lot of people are attempting to liberate themselves from the consequence or from the possibility of death, because somewhere inside themselves, they really don't have a real hardcore faith in the reality of the transcendent. Because who would consent to such a thing?
Right.
One who is deathly afraid of the possibility of mortality.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't think that you could probably hit me, Chad, about the spirit of fear and everything that the Bible talks about with respect to that.
Yeah.
Because I think when one has the belief that the material world, right, Marx and his materialism, is all there is, and you should get it all in this life while you can get it, right? Just like when I listened to like the Nation of Islam, the quote was in the film, and it was actually in Alex Haley's biography, because the majority of Spike Lee's film, Malcolm X, was based upon Alex Haley's book. And it's even in the book where the Nation of Islam and Malcolm, he goes on, he says something to the effect of, the white man has you believing in his Jesus, believing in his God, while he creates his heaven on earth. So you believing in the white man's God, right? While, and so your belief in his God has made you docile, of course, while you experience hell here on earth, and the white man, because of your acceptance and your adoption of his God, is living his heaven on earth, right?
Yeah.
And so, but anyone who thinks that white people or actually experiencing heaven on earth, I mean, your conception of heaven is mighty truncated, is mighty limited, to
Right.
say the least. I think that when there's a lack of faith and a lack of belief in the transcendent, that can make for some horrible things. Mankind.
I'm listening to you, by the way.
Yeah, I know, man. We can be extremely cruel to one another when we have that sort of mentality. So I'll pass it back to you, man, because that's what I think. And also, when you talked about, just to be fair for all of our equity, our gender equity enthusiasts out there, of course, when you talked about women and being modest and everything, and not being tempting to men, the same, of course, I think can be said about men, not, I was thinking of it in a totally separate way, but of course, men, we can flaunt our body, we can be sexual or whatever.
Right.
But when you have men online and social media, you know, posing photographs and the jewelry, the gold chains, the high priced, a European
Yeah.
designer clothing and this and that and the third. It is sinful to entice the envy or elicit envy in others
Yep.
simply for the sake of doing so.
Right. 100%.
Look at me. My car is better than yours. My clothes are better than yours. My
100%.
girlfriend or my wife looks better than yours.
Yep.
It's like,
And the thing
it's
is
not the
like,
way.
I'm actually harder on men than I am on women, obviously,
Sure.
because I am a man. People ask me too,
Sure.
like, why are you so hard on black people when white people do it too, or what have you? Like, well, I'm a black man, so I'm speaking to black people. But I'm a Christian first and foremost, and so if you claim to be a Christian, again, but you are more of a surrogate for modern culture, modern secular culture, than you are for the faith that you claim to have, then I'm not necessarily going to call you out on it. I'm just going to, hey, like, from brother to brother or from brother to sister, this is what our mutual faith says, and this is what we're advocating for. Let's talk about that. Let's think about that. Let's sharpen each other, and let's pursue Christ instead of the world. And so, yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when you bring up this kind of worldly competition that we as men engage in. Those of us who claim to be Christians. Not only that, but too, where it talks about, and this is something that's kind of coming out of the so-called manosphere, where you have men, in order to compete for the hand of the higher echelon of women, are really kind of investing in getting their money up, getting their body right, getting all these things. And it's like, they're doing it with their ultimate goal, once again, being able to be desired by the higher echelon of women. And I don't think that there's anything wrong in eating healthy and making wise financial choices, so on and so forth. However, when it becomes this extreme thing where your view of what it means to be a man of honor is skewed, because again, from the Bible we learn that yes, it does talk about as a man you are the leader of your household. However, it also says not to lord your authority over your wife, right? And so that kind of flies in the face and this kind of brash, kind of egotistical spirit that a lot of these men in the manosphere are advocating for, right? Like I did listen to Kevin Samuels when he was alive. I think he was right about 70% of the time, to the extent where he encouraged a man of value being able to sleep with other women, even though he's married, like, because he's highly sought after. He, in a sense, deserves to be able to have side pieces. Like, these are the kind of things that he would say. He wouldn't say it all the time, but there were moments when he would say stuff like that, and I think he's absolutely 100% wrong. And so I'm going to choose the biblical version of a thing 10 times out of 10. The biblical version of manhood, the biblical version of womanhood, the biblical version of child rearing, the biblical version of marriage, the biblical, whatever it is, I'm going to always choose the biblical version of that thing and not the worldly version of that thing. And so, yes, I'm not trying to target, and I know you weren't accusing me of this, but I'm not trying to target women and be super critical of women. I'm saying, like, whatever the case may be, we as Christians today in 22 often choose, not necessarily in a way of like, oh, that was a mistake, I'm a human being, but no, we choose it unapologetically, the way of the world over the way of what the Bible says in terms of what we ought to do and how we ought to live. And that's the point that I was aiming to make.
Can I tell you a real quick story, Chad? It reminds me of what you're talking about, especially when you brought up The Adam and Eve, the message, how, the serpent tempted Eve and, made her believe that, she could be a god and everything else. Um, so and so to me, the God of the God of the Bible has become a self insert for our own kind of ego into how we perceive ourselves, right? And here's a perfect example. So I went to church Sunday, and my daughter comes in the room. We're getting ready for church, and she has on these socks, and on the socks are the words like kindness and love and respect, and just like these socks, just random socks with all these like colorful socks with all these like nice words on them. She's 12 years old. She came in the room. She said, "Dad, look, my socks." She's like, "What a coincidence. We're on our way to church. Check this out now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on my way to we're on our way to church. And look at my socks. My socks have all these like Christian words on them. I just said, love, kindness, stuff like that." So I looked right at her and I said, "Oh yeah, those are Christian words, huh? Where's hell? Where's sin? Where's judgment? Where's wrath?" Right? All these things. And she kind of was taken aback. "Dad, what?" I was, she kind of was like, "I was just making a point to say." I said, "Well, you said these are Christian socks." Well, that part is missing, because therein lies the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because you said, because God, of course, is perfect. Thus, God, is a God of judgment. So when people say, how could, and I hope I'm not getting off the path too far here, but I'm just going where my mind is going, listening to you. People often ask, well, how can a God that loves you can punish you and send you to hell and everything else? And the answer is simple, because he's God and you're not.
Right.
You see, you say, well, why would you, people make mistakes, they this, they that. Right. Of course, the only sin that God doesn't forgive, I guess, is apostasy, which is denial. Right.
Right.
But, you receive the punishment of eternal damnation and everything else, because that is in fact what you deserve for your disobedience. When people oftentimes overly emphasize the fact that God loves you, they are really seeing themselves in God, because of course when people are not being told that they are doing something wrong and made to self-correct,
Mm-hmm.
they see an image staring back at them when they look in the mirror of someone who loves them, because everyone can say they love themselves.
Yeah.
You hear it all the time in the culture. Right. Love yourself. Love you.
Hey,
this,
by the way, so like right now you see a lot of these celebrities, and
Mhm.
I see it everywhere. Like I see YouTubers pushing this particular thing as part of their sponsors. I see it being broadcasted and promoted on NPR, and not only that, but also I see both conservative and liberal commentators, journalists, news analysts, so on and so forth, pushing this thing, right? Even Kevin Samuels was pushing it whenever he was alive, and that is betterhelp.com, right? And the way that they are kind of promoting it is like saying, look, there's, we all have mental health issues. You need to get your mental health right. Go to betterhelp.com. We have, 500,000 therapists at the ready. They're there to talk to you about your issues, what have you. Go to betterhelp.com today to get your stuff figured out. And I'm thinking, why on the one hand is a secular, godless society constantly pushing mental health, and you need to get your mental health in order, right? On the one hand, they're constantly pushing mental health, and then on the other hand, they're constantly pushing, therapy. You need to get into therapy, right? We go to these websites. We make access to therapy easier these days. Like, what's going on with that? What's going on under the surface in terms of pushing these things, right? And not, I wasn't only thinking about that as of, as it stands right now, with the help of with the pushing of, mental health and therapy, but also at the turn of the 20th century, they were pushing what? Social workers, right?
Yeah.
The progressive era, you had these young, intellectual, children of elitists who were graduating from Ivy League schools, and
Movers and the shakers.
the movers and the shakers.
Yeah.
And they were really advocating for the need of an influx in social workers, especially after
Mhm.
the Great Depression. We need social workers to try to deal with the fallout of the Great Depression. All the people who are in poverty, all the children who aren't eating, and all the fathers who take to the bottle and are abusive to their children and to their wives, and all the things. We need an influx of social workers, right? And so at every turn of the century, you see this kind of pushing of these state evangelists, these people who are trained to be ministers, sent, ordained by the state,
Yeah.
with, a kind of godless philosophy that undergirds their worldview. And these are supposed to be the people who are supposed to get guidance and wisdom. You used the word wisdom earlier. We're supposed to get wisdom from these people. And so they are, in a sense, trying to make the church redundant, to make preachers of the gospel redundant, and to raise up in its place agents of the state to act as ministers for the populace. And is that to say that all of the therapists who work for BetterHelp.com are secularists? No, I'm not saying that at all. But I do find it very suspicious that the same people who are trying to remove God from every aspect of human life are the same people who are saying you need to get your mental health in order and you need to see therapists that we recommend in order to do just that. What say you?
I was going to ask you, Chad, because you brought it up, and I'm sitting here nodding, man, because it's something that me personally, I just, I'm trying, I try to be understanding, and I think that's one of the things that people with insidious or malevolent intentions do. They exploit the good faith of well-meaning people, and I try to have that sort of understanding, but I am, quite frankly, and what say you? I want to get your opinion, because I think that we are seeing today almost this sort of fetishism, this fetishizing of mental illness, almost to say it's like people sort of want to be kind of categorized and labeled as having some kind of mental deficiency, because it almost sort of it just like all these other labels and tags that are of course meant to connote that you are in fact somehow insufficient, and so people are sort of chasing these. It's just kind of, it's sort of weird to me. Everyone, I don't quite know. I think it's happening on something more at the base, something fundamental that is happening in society, and by the time these people get, I think one of the things is that in American life today, we overemphasize empathy. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with empathy, but one of the things, of course, that we also need in society is discipline and expectation. And so I think, when you have an abundance of empathy and compassion, what that in turn does is produce a legion or a nation of narcissistic, malignant narcissists, and
Yeah.
those types of individuals. When you have that, and so everyone sort of had, you see people throw around these terms, like the snowflake generation and these sorts of things, and everyone's all so sort of neurotic, and on the one hand, I'm saying to myself, dude, I'm tired. I don't want to hear about your problem. I'm so tired of man. Just shut up, shake it
Yeah.
off, and get on with it. You know what I mean? Like and maybe
I never, because my grandmother, I'm one of those people who grew up in the 90s.
right.
Both of my, like, I'm one of those people who's like, I've always known my grandmothers to be old, right?
Right.
I don't know what it's like to have a young grandmother, and that's not, crapping on people who have young grandmothers, but I've always known my grandmothers to be old. And I say that, and my paternal grandmother lived in Arkansas, and we would go there every summer to visit her. I would basically spend the entire summer at her house with my cousins. My maternal grandmother lived in the town that neighbored mine, so we were over there every weekend. We would go to church with her, in her big yellow Cadillac. So, um, one thing I can say about my grandmothers, and I say my grandmothers because by the time I came around, or at least since I could remember, my grandfathers were passed. My my maternal grandfather passed the year before I was born. My maternal grandfather, my paternal grandfather died when I was 2. So I don't really know what they were like other than what my aunts and uncles told me about their lives. But, if, I'm taking what they said at face value, then the same of what my grandmother's, what I've experienced with my grandmothers is true of what they said. Anyway, sorry for the confusion of it all.
I got
But
you.
what I'm getting at is this. I never heard my grandmothers complain about anything, right? They never complained about the lives that they had to live. They never complained about, you know, um, being treated unfairly or feeling as though they need to go to therapy for something or what have you. Like, I've never experienced that. In fact, what I saw in them was often inspiration and encouragement. And to the extent that we as children were complaining about something, them encouraging us to toughen up, to, get back to work, to get back to your business, so on and so forth. So that was the kind of leadership that I had growing up. And the same is true
Yeah.
of my parents. They never made me to feel sorry for myself. They never um, um, exemplified this kind of, it's not your fault, it's the world's fault. Um, or you're too inept or too incompetent to take care of this situation or that situation because of trauma, because of, you know, um, depression or what have you. That's not to say that depression isn't real. That's not to say that
Right.
trauma isn't real. But what I'm saying is, I was never encouraged to look at trauma or depression or anything else as an excuse, as a kind of crutch or arm brace that prevented me from lifting things or from being, a boy or a man, and getting, back to business. And so the fact that we are now in a generation where you have this kind of external influence that people are taking seriously and are taking to heart and are implementing within their own lives and are advising others of. You have this kind of implementation of, allowing whatever ails you to be the thing that is the ultimate excuse for why you can't be an adult, for why you can't be an individual and take care of your own responsibilities and your own affairs. And what my concern is that to the extent that these people are constantly encouraging therapy, the question becomes, okay, what is the stock of the therapist that you're sending these people to? What are they encouraging these people to do? How are they walking through and working through the problems that these people are dealing with? You know what I mean? You can't just say go to therapy and sit somebody down in front of somebody who may have some kind of license or have went to some kind of school, because at the end of the day, that person is just as human as I am. And just because you have a license doesn't necessarily make you wise. That doesn't necessarily make you somebody who should be sitting down in front of people as an authority. And don't get me, and let's not kid ourselves. I mean, even though, therapists might tell you that, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just here to listen, right? I mean, it's clear whenever you walk into that therapist's office what the power dynamic is. Not to use liberal buzzwords, but it's clear what the power dynamic is. I'm coming to you for help. You're the one with the degree. You're the one who, with the training. You're the one who can listen for, different weak points in what I'm saying and help me through those things. It's clear who the authority is and who isn't in that room or over that phone or what have you. So let's not kid ourselves, right? And so, again, my concern is, yes, you have these therapists who have the licenses, who have the degrees, so on and so forth, but where are they getting their education? Is it rooted in sound wisdom and logic, or is it rooted in this kind of secular agenda that we find ourselves on in 2022? I mean, these are fair questions to ask, right?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely, man. I'm with you 100%. I'm always skeptical because especially when it comes to that, because I think I see a little bit too much acquiescence on behalf of the wider society, as opposed to stamping out, or at least if not stamping it out completely, at least giving the person that afflicted with whatever it is that they're dealing with the proper tools that they need in order to cope. We are making, not to use liberal buzzwords, spaces or safe spaces for their pathology, right? They're not being healed, fixed, but the society, in effect, is what's being destroyed because we are incorporating too much sickness.
Right. Yeah.
And people are, of course, being encouraged to indulge in, whatever,
Yeah.
kind of speaks to the whole victim obsession that we have in our society today. And I think this whole psychiatric sort of ordeal has a lot to do with what's going on in society today, right?
Right. So speaking of mental health, we're going to get into this video that you sent me. That's a good
yeah. Let's go, man. This was interesting. Here.
So you sent me this video, and I damn near threw my phone after watching it, because this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. If you guys are on IG,
hey, look, before you started, Chad, I sent it to you, and man, I know you're a super busy guy, man. You're getting pulled in 100 different directions. You're running a business. You're doing all this stuff, and so when I text you, I don't expect you to respond. But I was just like, Chad, I'm sitting here bugging out, bro. Like, you have to watch it. And when you don't respond, I'm sitting there like, I hope he didn't just disregard his message. I hope he really I hope he watched this.
Yeah.
And then I ended up speaking to you later. You was like, no, I watched it. Yeah. So I was like,
I watched it.
I didn't want to miss this one.
No, I watched it, and I sent it to Judge Joe Brown after I watched it. Yeah, he just texted me back SMDH. So no, it's crazy. But yeah, if you guys are on IG and you want to see what we're talking about, head on over to my YouTube channel at Chad O. Jackson. We're going to be watching portions of this video that is part and parcel of the tactics that Democrats are using to try to get Black people out to vote, right? And it just kind of, like, if nothing else, like, watching this video, if you still think that the Democrat Party or politicians in general have your best interest in mind, I hate to use words like lost cause, but I mean, I just don't know what to tell you. I simply just don't know what to tell you. And again, I spoke on this earlier, like all the chicanery, all of the circusing, all of the puppeteering that has gone on and this is a midterm election, right? This isn't even a general, like this is a midterm election. And it's interesting because it's like typically people ignore midterm elections. And by the way, Chuck, I don't know if I shared this with you before, but people ought to be glad I'm not the king of America. Because if I was the king of America, I'd switch all this up. Like when it comes to voting, like, first of all, I don't think everybody should vote.
I don't either.
I think everybody should vote.
I think 18 is way too young.
Yeah.
I got a lot of issues.
18 is too young to vote. I think you should be at least 30 years old to vote.
Yes, sir.
Right.
I have a lot of issues with the voting, but and I know that we've gone way beyond the Rubicon. The voting age will never be raised. It will never be. I mean, I hate to say never, but Yeah,
Everybody
man.
just be thankful that me and Chuck are not the kings of America.
Yeah, be
Because if we were
glad. Be glad.
because if we were, I mean, I don't know how you feel about the age of 30 being the minimum age of vote, but I think it should be 30.
Yeah,
Not only that, but I think you should be able to pass a litmus test in order to be able to register to vote, right?
yeah.
I think you should have to demonstrate that you know the role of your government, that you know what the executive branch's role is, that you know what the judiciary's role is, that you know what the legislative branch's role is, that you know what the role of the media is, right? I think you should be able to know what the job of a senator is and how a senator is elected versus how it used to be elected. I think you should know these things.
People don't
Um,
even know that, man. They don't even know that senators didn't used to. Yeah, it didn't work like that.
right.
What amendment was that? The 14th. What was
Yep.
it?
Yep. But like, I
Yeah.
think that because think about it, we already do that with immigrants who are becoming, American citizens. Like we require them to take these tests, these citizenship tests. They study for them, and if you think about it, these are people who want to become Americans, right? And they study for these tests and they take them seriously. You see them being sworn in, or whatever you call it, and they have American flags and they're waving them. They're quite proud of that moment, and it's a very like chill-inducing thing to watch. It's something that we should be proud of as Americans, that people want to come here and take part in the American experience. That's something to behold. Uh, but if you look at our public schools, our high schools, right, they're getting free. They say free education, although my tax dollars paid for it. And by the way, I voted this morning, and I voted no on literally every bond my local school district tried to pass and raise my tax dollars on the back of. So I hope that if you live in my town, you did the same thing, because I'm not trying to see my tax dollars or my property taxes go up. But
Whoa, Chad! You mean to tell me that you're actually putting forth your political opinion as opposed to just telling people to go vote? Let me say this, just a little levity.
yeah,
All of you, hey, make sure you go vote. Listen, if you ain't voting the way I want you to vote, stay your ass at home. Why would I'm not. Why are you doing that? Why are you telling people to go? Don't you have an interest, a vested interest in what's
yeah.
going on? Listen, man,
I
before
mean,
I urge you to go vote, let me just have a conversation. What do you think about? No, because if you tell me that I'm from Michigan, if you tell me you voting for Whitmer as opposed to Tudor, I don't know, but I might put the old banana in the tailpipe. You might come
right.
outside to flash tires and stuff. I'm just joking. I'm totally joking, but I just had to throw that out there
Yeah,
because to me that's just another a bogus kind of gesture, or what they call a virtue
yeah,
signaling, right? I mean, what is the point of telling somebody to go vote
yeah.
if they aren't voting the way you want? I'm not encouraging nobody to vote if you voting against what's in my best interest. I don't want you to vote.
No, because here's the thing. Here's the thing.
But
Here's the
anyway,
thing.
bro,
Here's the
go
thing.
ahead, man.
I
I'm
used to
sorry.
live in a town, right, that was 65% renters, right? Think about that. 65% of the people who lived in this town that I used to live in were
Coming for your
renters,
property.
right? So the thing about it is, in this town that was made up majority of renters, each election cycle, you see all these signs: get out and vote, get out and vote, get out and vote, get out and vote. And don't get me wrong, I don't think that people who rent a property versus own a property should be less entitled to vote than, anybody else. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is that when you become a homeowner, you think about things differently. You just
Yes,
do.
sir.
You
Yes,
just do.
sir.
I mean, if you drive through any predominantly rent neighborhood here in Texas, and then you drive through a predominantly owned neighborhood here in Texas, you can see an aesthetic difference between the two. Again, there's
Pride and
exceptions to this
ownership.
rule. Again,
Pride and ownership.
there's exceptions
Go
to
ahead.
this rule. So I'm not generalizing, but I'm saying for the most part, you do see a difference, right? And so for me, it's like, yes, as a person who pays taxes, who pays property taxes, that go to fund the building of more schools and more programs and more this and more of that has to do with the school, and I don't benefit from the existence of these schools because all my children are homeschooled, right? I do think it's and not only that, but it's like it will be one thing if the schools were actually teaching the children of substance, if they were actually setting them up for success, if it wasn't just about sports and wasn't just about the social life, right? They're trying to socially engineer our children more than they are educate our children. And so I do have a beef with my tax dollars going to fund something as abysmal as a centralized public school system, right? And so, yeah, I did vote against all of those bonds trying to extract more out of me than what they already are. I have my own mouth to feed, and that of my family, that of my children. I have employees to keep busy. I have other interests that I have that, I would like to engage in as a free citizen of this country and of my respective community. And to the extent that these demagogue politicians and their funders get everybody out to vote, not knowing full well what it is you're voting for or who it is that you're voting for, just go vote, right?
Right.
Like the people who suffer 10 times out of 10 are the middle class entrepreneurial people. You don't even necessarily have to be entrepreneurial. All you need to be is a family man or a family woman who's trying to just basically, maintain some quality of life for you and your family. You're the person who is going to suffer as a result of this social engineering that's going on by these demagogues who are using low information or no information voters to get done what they want to get done. That's the point that I'm making. And so the video that we're about to watch, and I know I introduced it like 5 times, this is part and parcel of that kind of the tactics that they use to get people to the polls. So without further ado, here we go. Again, if you're on IG, the way you can see this video and participate with us is by going on over to YouTube at Shadow Jackson.
You said. Say Val Demings. Say it again, Val Demings.
Okay, so first impression, Chuck.
Man, listen.
Okay, so far,
well,
her speech consisted of the words Val Demings 5 times. So far, that's her speech. So what say you?
And you all familiar with her, Jennifer Lewis. She plays the same quintessential, stereotypical, matriarchal, strong Black woman. She's sort of like that. She's everybody's Black mama, and she plays the same role every single solitary movie or program she's in. She is, in fact, what you're seeing or what you're about to see in her little campaign speech. That's the role she portrays every time she's on screen. I don't even know if she actually knows how to act. She just pretty much gets on camera and beats herself and is herself. But there you go.
I agree 100%. Isn't there like a meme of her like passing out or something like that at a church or something like that?
Not a meme, we talked about. I haven't seen it. Yeah, it may be. I haven't seen it though.
Val Demings. Now, you all know Val's platform.
Do we though?
Well, I'm sure she's going to tell us, so let's hear.
All right.
I came down here from Hollywood to cuss y'all out. Just like I cussed out.
Okay, so she said that I came down here from Hollywood to cuss y'all out. To me, I don't think people really understand the irony of that, right? Like Hollywood, when is the last time that Hollywood disseminated useful information for the general public? I'll wait. When is the last time Hollywood disseminated useful information to the general public? And so she's speaking as though it's this badge of honor, first of all, that she lives in the ivory tower of Hollywood. And secondly, that Val Demings was worthy enough for whatever this lady's name is, Jennifer, to come down out of the ivory tower to the slums of Florida to stump for her campaign because it's that important. Like, no, like, go back to Hollywood. I mean, you've done enough damage. You've spread enough poison with your nonsense. But it's like, to me, it's like, what do you think? Do you think people kind of see the irony in what she's saying?
I don't know. Maybe the people in attendance, I'm not quite sure they picked up on it, but we sure as hell did, because I don't think, you or I or anyone watching us right now would be caught dead at a Val Demings campaign rally. But
and then too, like, you notice that people aren't really that hype. And
yeah.
It's like she's getting really a few claps here and there, but it's like she's doing all this moving around and all this commotion. She has the symbolic afro. You know what I mean? And the big hoop
that's how you know she's down
bright red lipstick. Yeah.
That's how you know she's down for the cause. She has a natural.
She has a natural.
Whatever they got, afro, that's how you know, right?
Right.
The afro is coming back, right?
Yeah.
Colin Kaepernick.
Chief Val Demings. Now, you all know Val's platform. I came down here from Hollywood to cuss y'all out. Just like I cussed out Tupac Shakur. How many of y'all know that movie with Janet Jackson? I told Tupac, boy, shut up and put the cigarette out. But I didn't say it like that. Now.
That's very cringy, by the way.
Very.
It's like, hey, yeah, you know me from this movie with Tupac where I was yelling at him and told him to put the cigarette out. You remember? Just in case you don't know. That's the movie that I'm from. So because I'm from that movie, or I was in that movie, everything I'm about to say is credible and you should listen to me. Again, like, if you were somebody who literally had something of substance to bring to the conversation to Florida voters as to who they ought to vote for, then you don't need to tout these credentials of what movie you were in, or the fact that you live in Hollywood and the fact that you're a movie star and so on and so forth. And you open your speech saying Val Demings 8 times, trying to figure out what it is you want to say. It's like, if you really cared about this election in Florida, if you really think that Ron DeSantis is the wrong choice for the people of Florida, then come with something substantive to say to get people to vote. But the fact of the matter is, they think so little of Florida voters, of Floridians. They think so little of the black voter demographic that they feel like all they need to do is quote a movie that came out in the mid-90s so you can familiarize yourself with that movie and thus with Tupac, and think that that's going to prompt people in Florida to vote. And to me, it's outrageous. What say you?
None to add, brother. You hit the nail on the head, and it gets worse. If you all haven't seen this, it's about to get a lot worse. Okay. So strap in.
Yeah, buckle up.
Guys, listen to me. Honey, you got to be quiet. I can hear you, but I got this speech to make. And this speech is going to go around the world. Oh, you going to keep, I'll have you removed, darling. I will. Okay? Hold on to yourself. Thank you. I need to concentrate. I want to deliver for Val today. Now, say something else. I got to have you removed, okay? So don't do it. Thanks, Pumpkin. Now, Val's mother was a maid. My mother was a maid. Val's father was a janitor. My father was a janitor. Val is the youngest of 7 children. I'm the youngest of 7 children. So I know what she's come through. Huh? Because I know what I have come through, despite it all. But we both rose to the top, didn't we? Now, Val's mother, I'm a movie star, and she's the next senator of Florida.
So which is it? Is it the case that America is an abysmally racist country where black people can't make it? Or is it the case that regardless of who your parents worked for or what kind of job they did, their children, and hell, even them, depending on what opportunities they seize and how they're willing to apply themselves, is it true that anybody can make it in America? Which is it? I mean, these people, they want to have it both ways. Again, on the one hand, they want to push the fact that America is racist, that people can't make it. But on the other hand, they want to push that I made it as a movie star, Val Demings made it as a politician, therefore anybody can make it in America. I mean, do you see the hypocrisy here?
Y'all, Val Demings is the truth. Because she knows what a lie is. She also knows, like me, you cannot lie your way to greatness. Marco Rubio is a liar. He is, y'all see that debate? Lied his ass off.
What's up?
I'm just laughing at her diction and her slang, the way she's speaking. I mean, there's a time and a place for everything, man. That kind of sort of street corner, soapbox, barbershop rhetoric. I mean, I think about the clip when we did our last we did our last collaboration, and you played the clip of the gentleman from 1961 who was going on and on about how the older generation and Uncle Toms and whatever else, because you were getting to explaining the origin of that whole frame of mind with the Uncle Tom tag. And the thing about it is that young man from 1961, 9 out of 10 of those men did not change.
Exactly.
Those are the 70 and 80-year-old guys hanging outside on the stoop.
Yep.
Or the old crop of guys hanging out in the barbershop who don't ever seem to get their haircuts. They're just there. And you'll hear this kind of street corner rhetoric in places. See, because a lot of this, we talked about blackness earlier, right? This black culture as such as it is, it's inherited, right? Because a lot of the older folk, once again, right, the sort of baby boomer generation, if you want to sort of place the burden or put the blame at their feet, but they didn't change much. But this is the kind of stuff that you hear, and once again, this kind of talk, from what we're hearing from Jennifer Lewis, from the stuff that we hear commonly on MSNBC, CNN, and that kind of talk was once upon a time relegated to, places where it just wasn't a part of polite conversation.
Right.
And now all of a sudden, here is someone campaigning for someone who wants to become a part of the highest legislative body in the land. And this is the way she's speaking publicly. Because I can go to the street corner and, talk jive, as they used to call it, or slang. But here you are campaigning for someone who wants to become a member of the United States Senate. And this is how you are speaking in public. It's quite shameful. I got to tell you, and mind you, she doesn't explain, because I didn't see the debate between Rubio and Demings, but she sure as hell doesn't explain precisely what Marco Rubio lied about. She just accused him of lying.
Right.
I would like to know exactly, because going back to what we talked about with respect to the Senate, right, which is speaking of democracy, right, the passage of the 14th Amendment brought in more democracy, rule, principle in our politics, which I don't think was a net benefit for the nation. But that's where we are now, and it's sort of like the Senate is almost like the way that it's like the presidential waiting room,
Right.
because you're sort of campaigning, or you are, I guess, in theory, representing your state, but you're really just a low level national politician trying to gain fame, and you don't always do what is in the best interest of the state you supposedly represent. But yeah, man, it's crazy, man. But you go back. I'm just on a tangent right now. Go ahead, man.
No, you're good. Great points, by the way. Where'd it go?
Uh-oh.
It's crazy.
You got it?
Yeah, it's... Oh, here we go. I guess it was a mistake to go back full screen, because now it took me off the spot that I was at, but it's okay. We build it as we fly.
You
found it?
tell
Okay.
your tale, DeMarco, and all those other weak men.
Look how, like...
Marco Rubio is a liar. She also knows, like me, you cannot lie your way to greatness.
Projection. But yeah, look how, like, unenthused this crowd looks. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, half these people are like, who is this lady?
Right. So washed up, one of those faces, one of those entertainers that you see her all the time, right? But she's not a headliner, so she's like, and you have to describe something she's been in when you, it's like, oh yeah,
I
her.
do
It's
remember
like,
her from that
her
movie.
name. But you know her, the lady in the what she played. She was a lady in the Temptations movie, or she played Tupac's mother. She was one of
Put out that
Will
cigarette.
She was one of Will Smith's aunties in the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You know, she was Vivian's sister. Oh yeah, that lady.
Yeah,
always loud, always scream. Yeah, that lady.
It's crazy because it's like, I think I've asked you like at least 2 or 3 times in this live alone, like, what's her name again? Because I honestly, so they'll take it anywhere they can get it. But yeah, I would venture to say the majority of the people sitting here have no idea what her name is. They might recognize her face from a movie that they watch, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Marco Rubio is a liar. He is, y'all see that debate? Lied his ass off. Val Demings will win.
You know what I think it is?
What's that?
I think it's that you have these urban radio shows, these urban radio morning shows that come on, For a long time was a Time Joiner morning show. You have the Steve Harvey show, Ricky Smiley. You had Michael Bazin that came on in the afternoon, and so on and so forth. To the extent that these surrogates talk about politics, they always give half-truths. They always give like very weak takes and interpretations that toe a party line more so than actually telling the truth. And one of the things that they are notorious of is constantly saying that Republicans are liars, that conservatives are liars, that America's a lie, that this and that is a lie, 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 lie. And so that's what they constantly peddle and regurgitate to the black masses, or at least those, black folks who listen to their radio programs. Now, that kind of creates this kind of backdrop whereby somebody like this Jennifer lady can go and say that Marco Rubio lied in the debate without giving you any kind of substance or evidence of what he lied about. You know what I mean? People will nod their heads and go along with it and say, yeah, he lied, only because they heard their favorite radio personality say it over and over and over again. They don't necessarily have to give you evidence. They don't necessarily have to say what they lied about. All that matters is that my favorite, radio personality said it, therefore it must be true. And I can familiarize myself and relate to what Jennifer is now saying because she's echoing what I've always been told all my life. I mean, what do you think about that take?
Man, you said it, man. I'm running through in my mind. It's amazing, man, growing up. And just like you said, they talk a good game, but they told this party line. I'll give you a perfect example. I mean, we all see it, right? When we're talking about, for example, racism, racist rhetoric, racist words, this, that, and the third. But see, the black celebrity class, they are not they have no fidelity whatsoever to the concept of anti-racism as they would define it, because the pendulum never swings both ways. See, they aren't against racism. They don't despise racism. They just despise Republicans. They just despise conservatives.
Yeah.
We can all go back, because I remember, I don't know, I'm sure you've seen it, and it's very illuminating to those of you who haven't seen it, and you need to go and check it out. Because I think, as a matter of fact, I think I may still have it saved on my DVR. Because I went to see it at the movie theater when it aired in my local town, but I also saved it on my DVR when it aired on PBS, and that was Clarence Thomas's documentary, in my own words. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I have.
But it was deep to sit back and listen to him in his own words, as the title suggests, relay to the viewer exactly what he went through during the whole Anita Hill controversy. And they went into detail how the media, especially how the black media, treated him. We all go back and we remember shows like In Living Color, and the skits and the way they would defame. And see, one thing, I think it was the late comedian Norm Macdonald, who once famously said that mockery only works in comedy when you actually love that which you are in fact sort of making fun of, because if you don't, then it just comes off as venom.
Right.
And hate. It's not funny.
Right.
At least not, to the vast majority of people outside of your little group there. But yeah, man, I think about when I was a kid, I remember the film Boys in the Hood, which overall I thought was a good film.
Yep.
I thought there was some good points made in the film, but of course you had, some of your radical left-wing talking points. I mean, this is John Singleton we're talking about. May God rest his soul. But I remember the scene when they're walking to school and there was a portrait. There was a telephone pole, and it had or something. I'm trying to remember the scene, but you all probably know where I'm going with this. And there was a scene where they were walking, and there was a photograph of Ronald Reagan, and and on the photograph there was bullet holes all in Ronald Reagan's face as they were walking to school.
Yeah.
And John Singleton made sure to show the viewer, here's Ronald Reagan, and here is exactly what we think of Ronald Reagan. Bullet holes in his face. I remember, I don't know if you ever seen the film, and they're remaking it now. I'm kind of sad about it because, it's all time one of those hood movie, Clap Your Black Card, if you haven't seen this. And that was the original House Party starring Kid and Play.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that in the scene in Kid and Play when Kid, the light-skinned guy with the big high top fade, he gets into a fight with the bullies at his school, played by the musical act Full Force. And as he's getting into it with them in the cafeteria, they're arguing back and forth, and Kid in the film reaches back and grabs a handful of Jello, and he hurls the Jello at the bullies. They duck or whatever to avoid getting hit with the handful of Jello, and it hits the wall, and on the wall is a portrait of Ronald Reagan. And the handful of Jello smacks against Reagan, and it drips down the wall. Once again, an open slight to Ronald Reagan. I remember all of this stuff. I remember as a kid watching the film New Jack City, of course, with Wesley Snipes and Jason Payne, whatever his name is, and Mario Van Peebles. And there's a scene when the Cash Money brothers are in the infantile stages of their criminal enterprise, and they're coming together and they're planning how they're going to distribute their crack cocaine. And Wesley Snipes' character Nino Brown has a line in that film where he says, man, we got to do what we got to do because you have to rob to get rich in the Reagan era. That's what he said. So he's intimating in that line that the 80s was just this horrible, right? We hear about Reaganomics, voodoo economics, as they called it, right? In an attempt to sort of lambast to make fun of Ronald Reagan's economic vision. And so here you have the viewer, you're giving them this impression that because of Ronald Reagan, especially the 80s was a horrible time for America. More specifically, the 80s was a horrible time for African Americans. And I can go on and on. I remember I could quote scripture and verse, the film Mo Money and this is my last example because I can literally keep going. In the film Mo Money, I don't know if you ever seen Mo Money with Damon Wayans and the younger Wayans, Marlon Wayans. They're two kind of con artist brothers or whatever, trying to figure out a way to kind of go straight. And one of their little hustles in the beginning of the film, the part where Damon Wayans' character meets the love interest in the film, which is Stacey Dash, they're selling books in this kind of business district on a street corner. And Marlon Wayans' character, he doesn't want to sell the books. But Damon Wayans is trying to encourage him. His character is trying to encourage him, man, come on, man, we got to sell these books. And, trying to get the parents to buy books for the children. And Marlon Wayans' character says, see, his name, Damon Wayans' character name was Johnny. I remember now. He says, see, Johnny, why are we trying to sell these books? The parents don't care about their children's futures anymore. Hell, man, why in the hell you think Bush is in office? Because the film came out in 91, 92. So he's saying the parents don't want to buy books for their children because the parents don't care about their children's education, which is why they elected George Bush.
Right.
Now, listen, I'm not saying that they weren't viable, criticisms of the Reagan administration and the Herbert Walker Bush administration, whatever. But going back to what I said moments ago, the pendulum never swung the other way.
Right.
So I grew up with the understanding as a child, and it was, that of course Republicans bad, Democrats good.
So there's subliminal messaging is what you're saying, and it's been in the so-called black art for a very long time. Even if you go back to the blaxploitation films in the 1970s, the film The Mac. I don't know if you've actually watched it, but I have. And
Max Union, Mac. Okay, yeah.
so in the Mac, he's talking about like wanting to go clean or wanting to go straight, and he decides against it, and he says, "I'm not going to take some job working 9 to 5 just to be able to scratch a living like my daddy did. I'm going to be a hustler. I'm going to make a ticket. I'm going to make $1 million." And so that's basically he's decrying and lambasting living a square life, and basically glorifying this kind of thug lifestyle that later became popular as you got closer to the 90s. And so there's always been this subliminal messaging, but what you're talking about specifically is just like doing so at the expense of Republicans, of conservative the conservative worldview, so on and so forth. And so to the question of like, okay, why is it that a lot of black voters vote and think against their own best interests? And the reason for that, I think in part, is exactly what you're saying. When you're conditioned because of the things that you consume in the way of entertainment to think negatively or to react to certain stimuli in such a way that you have a negative reaction to anything resembling so-called republicanism, even though the policy in itself might be beneficial to you, again, to that extent will you continually vote and move against your own best interest. So again, Jennifer, whatever her last name is a continuation of peddling the same kind of worldview. What were you going to say though?
Before you get back into Jennifer Lewis, this is
Lewis,
slightly related to entertainment, but not so much. Because I thought about, for example, once again, when I remember when Bill Clinton, I don't know, Chad, I think you're a little younger than me, but you may have be familiar with it or may have seen when Bill Clinton went on the Arsenio Hall show, and remember there was this whole famous scene with him playing a saxophone, right?
Yeah,
it was like, oh, and then it was a running trope within the black community, such as it is.
He was the first black president.
That he was the first black president. Remember that. And of course, right, he could play the piano. He smoked weed, but he didn't inhale. But remember what happened with, I forgot the freaking woman when the whole thing about his sexual exploits.
Monica Lewinsky.
Got, when he I was thinking of the woman who made the sexual harassment claim against him, and this is when he suborned perjury. Anyway, and that was the whole issue, because he perjured himself. When he sort of suborned perjured Paula Jones.
Right, Paula
Jones.
She was at the last debate between Hillary and Trump. Trump being the ultimate troll.
His sexual assault victim and sat him in the front row. I love Trump, man. But anyway, that was such a gangster move.
Yeah.
But I think of, and then I remember it had the opposite effect. And I remember, God rest the late great Rush Limbaugh, he would make this point all the time. He would talk about how the media, and with the help, not just the news media, but with the help of the entertainment media, how they circled the wagons around Bill Clinton and made it seem as though, of course, that the Republicans were, and we talked about this, you and I, Chad, one-on-one over the phone, about how conservatives always get painted like they are the sexual, Puritans, and they're the prudes of the society and whatnot. And Bill Clinton's popularity increased after the Monica Lewinsky, or during the Monica Lewinsky scandal and the whole impeachment fiasco, because everybody was saying, well, it's just sex. I mean, who doesn't cheat on their wives, or who hasn't, committed, an act of adultery and this and that. And I know, especially, mind you, this may be anecdotal, but I remember specifically being a teenager and in high school during that time. And I just remember, a lot of blacks especially were like, hey, Clinton is our man, because now he plays a saxophone, he smokes weed, and he gets a little oral sex on the side from his little side piece or whatever. It endeared him to the black community. And I think that, in a way, speaks to the status of our moral decay and decline. That someone who can behave in such a manner, of course, it did nothing but bolster his reputation amongst black folks. The fact that he was in fact a sexual deviant. And so, once again, man, it's amazing to
Have
me.
you been
And
reading my
once
notes?
again, brothers from another mother, bro. I'm not reading your notes. We just kind of have the same opinions, a lot of the same opinions, but he became more popular. So once again, uh, you know,
Kiana Shaw
black
says Toni Morrison said that Bill Clinton was the first black president. And yeah, you're right,
she
Kiana.
was the first
Um,
to say that. Thanks,
Toni
Keanu.
Morrison
I
said
didn't
that.
know who coined it.
No, I'm saying
Okay,
in the
yeah.
comment section. In the comment section, she says Toni
Huh.
Morrison said that he was the first black president. And yeah, I do remember seeing that video where Toni Morrison said that. And it's funny once again because it's like, who is Toni Morrison, right? These are the people who they've demonstrated that they can write a poem or two, or they can write a book or two, or they can speak as an orator. And for that reason, they're bolstered by the progressive and mainstream media as leaders of black thought. And rather than questioning and making that decision on our own by these people's merits, we go for it. We adopt these people. Oh, Toni Morrison. Oh, Nikki Giovanni. Oh, James Baldwin. Oh, you know what I mean? Whoever the case may be. And it's like, if you actually read the things that these people wrote uh, objectively, you'll find that some of the things you like, a great number of it you don't. But that's your decision to make. Don't just take what these people say wholesale. And unfortunately, a lot of people do, So,
Yep.
Kiana, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right. I do remember Toni Morrison saying that. So.
Will win. She will win. So I say to Marco and all those other weak men,
It's so funny, by the way, that they say that Republicans or conservatives are so-called weak men. I mean, really? I don't see a lot of conservatives walking around with man buns and nose rings and neck tattoos, wearing their pants half off their ass. Like, I don't see a lot of conservative men doing that. And to the extent that I do see conservative men doing that, they might be struggling with something or trying to fit in, and I question their manhood. Not to be too judgmental, but it's like, to me, it's like it's so interesting to me how like feminists like to try to slam dunk on men by calling them weak men. And again, all it is talking points. All it is semantics to try to win an argument or flex, not based on credentials or merit, but based merely upon who can talk the most crap or who can, roast the hardest. That's really what it boils down to. It reminds me very much of like a freestyle battle. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if you've watched these, freestyle battles that are on YouTube. You see these people, they're all in each other's face. They're saying all these things. They're rhyming. They're pointing. You can see the sweat. You can see the spit flying out of their mouths as they talk, and they're going really hard. And it's like, you're thinking to yourself, like, okay, that's cool. Like, you're saying all these things, but you're really probably not about that life. You're really probably not about the life
Right.
that you're boasting about with your lyrics and with your rhymes. But you're
Right.
convincing because of the passion that you're bringing when you're freestyling, right? And so that's good to look at. That's a good spectacle. But my concern is that the spectator oftentimes don't realize that all that is theatrics. You know what I mean? That person who's freestyling is trying to win a check at the end of the round.
Right.
Val Demings or this Jennifer Lewis or whomever, she's trying to score votes for Val Demings. But again, have we stopped to ask ourselves, is there substance to what they're saying? Is it true that men like myself who vote conservative for the sake of seeing to it that I'm not being, graped. That's the word you're supposed to use. Otherwise, you get banned on YouTube. Don't want to get graped when it comes to like my, being overly taxed. A man who doesn't want, to have to suffer in terms of, having to lose my small business because you have this tyrannical government that the Democrats are trying to push for, that expands itself in the free market, in small businesses, because they seek to own the means of production, so on and so forth. Because I'm voting and using my vote and using my conservatism to fight these things off, that makes me weak. No, I'm not the one buying soy lattes every morning at Starbucks. With a man bun and talking about my feelings to a therapist on BetterHelp.com. Those are your so-called weak men. That's not to say that they're not redeemable. We're all redeemable, right? But I mean, let's get our facts straight about what these people are talking about, if that makes sense. You have anything you want to add?
I could add something, but I'm gonna hold off. I'm gonna let you just keep playing because I want you to get to the juicy part, man.
Okay.
You don't want you to get to the juicy part, so I'm gonna fall back a little bit.
Before you lie to us, remember Rosa sat on that bus.
Here we go.
Before you tell your tale, remember Mandela sat in that jail. Before you do anything, you remember Dr. King.
Oh my gosh.
Before you cheat and steal, I dare you to Google Emmett Till.
Oh my god. What? How? She thinks she really said something too.
Emmett Till, you say it! Emmett Till!
Now, what in the world does Rosa Parks, Nelson Mandela, who by the way is from another country, Martin Luther King, and Emmett Till have to do with a Republican and Democrat running for senator in Florida? What do those things have to do with each other? Again, this is appealing to emotionalism and sensationalism. There's no. Let me stop. This is making my head hurt. Is this a juicy part you're talking about?
Yeah, but I think of the old behavioral psychologist. I forgot his first name, but the whole phenomenon of Pavlov's dogs, the kind of Pavlovian reaction, right?
Yeah.
It's not about narrative weaving, storytelling. It's not about actually revealing facts. It's about trying to get you to feel a certain emotion whenever certain words or certain things are evoked. So when you think about Emmett Till, you see the image of his open casket, and I guess that's supposed to make you think racism. Okay. And you automatically, of course, connect racism to the Republican Party, I suppose. So you have to vote for the liberal, for the Democrat candidate. I suppose that is what she's trying to do. Because once again, she isn't really saying anything.
Right.
But, there you go. And of course, a lot of these false idols, I know, Chad, we've spoken about Dr. King together before. I know you have some more work and research you're putting out on Dr. King in the future. But once again, Nelson Mandela is another, not to get sort of sidetracked, but you say, of course, Nelson Mandela is from another country. But boy, oh boy, sort of like, you kind of dug into W.E.B. Du Bois and Uncle Tom too. Nelson Mandela is another figure who a lot of people think they know, but they don't.
Right.
Especially his wife.
Mm-hmm.
They were quite a pair.
Right.
And so, these men aren't aren't the heroes that you think they are.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, people can't tell you what your average person in our age group can't tell you why Nelson Mandela was such a great leader. They can't. Like, if you were to like catch them on the spot, hey, if you ask them the question, was Nelson Mandela a great leader? Yes, is the answer they'll give you. Why would they give you the answer? Because that's what they were told in school. That's what they've been told all their lives. There's portraits of him everywhere. There's, you know what I mean, you're constantly taught that Mandela was a great man. But if you ask them the subsequent question, well, why was he a great man? Why was he a great leader? Your average person wouldn't be able to tell you that. Again, we go along with the narratives that are laid out for us without questioning them to seeing if there's any substance to them. So that's just kind of the way it is.
Say it again, Emmett Till. I say this to all of you. And I know you listen to me because I know you love me.
I don't even know you. Like, what? I have no idea who you are. So no, I don't listen to you.
Oh, they want me to do one more. Now listen.
Did you just do like a cheerleader kick?
Yeah, she sure did. I don't even know what that was for, bro. Just to kind of show you that I'm 60, but I'm still flexible. I don't know, man. Enthusiasm. I mean, hey.
She just what's the word for that? Do we got any cheerleaders watching right now? What's the word for what she just did? I mean, it was kind of impressive though, because she damn near touched her fro with her toe.
Yeah. A lot of fun at a party.
Lord have mercy.
And come down here from Hollywood to tiptoe through the tulips. I came to tell y'all, you better vote. And let me tell you something. Anybody can get up here and scream vote. I want you to call that auntie that's sitting there drinking a Coke and smoking a cigarette and get her registered. The ones that say, oh, honey, I don't believe in that shit. That's who you drag to the poll, whether they believe it or not. You say, come on, auntie.
Be careful what you wish for, though, right? Because, I mean, you're saying, like, oh, take your aunt who isn't interested in politics and take her to the polls to vote. That's who you get to go vote. It's like, well, chances are people who sit out elections are disillusioned by the whole political landscape because they see the game that's being played and they'd rather just kind of keep to themselves, mind their own business, and do their own thing. And so to the extent that you show these, you demand that these people go vote. I mean, I'm one of those people, like, if I'm an old man and my liberal grandson is telling me, hey, granddad, go vote. They have, this guy running for or who is governor here in Texas. He's a fascist and he's ruining our country, this, that, and the other. I'll say, okay, grandson, I'll go vote. And I'll vote for that person who my grandson says is a fascist because he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, but that's the kind of person that I would be, because it's like, I'm going to vote for the person who makes the most common sense to me, not the person who is trying to win an election with doom and gloom and fear mongering as their campaign strategy, such as what Jennifer Lewis is doing in this speech.
Yes.
come on with me, and I'll buy you some McDonald's when it's over.
Wait, what?
Not that I eat McDonald's. Smoking a cigarette and get here from Hollywood to tiptoe through the tulips. I came to tell y'all, you better vote. And let me tell you something. Anybody can get up here and scream vote. I want you to call that auntie that's sitting there drinking a Coke and smoking a cigarette and get her registered. The ones that say, oh, honey, I don't believe in that shit. That's who you drag to the poll, whether they believe it or not. You say, come on, auntie, come on with me, and I'll buy you some McDonald's when it's over. Not that I eat McDonald's, but you know some of the old folks do.
You speechless, man. You don't know what to say. You're
I see why they
very
picked her.
seldom, man.
I see why they picked this woman to do the talking. She's advocating for cigarettes and Coca-Cola and McDonald's. Now, of course, she'll tell you, I don't eat McDonald's. I'm too special for that. You know, I like to take care of this temple. I want to be 70 years old, still kicking.
Drinking kick. Right. Still kick.
I want to be able to do my little cheerleader kicks on the stage at the age of 85. So, and still, you know, have a natural without any signs of a gray hair in there whatsoever. And that's quite impressive. You know what I mean? So, she wants to be able to
crack,
do that.
Man. It's the melanin magic, you see.
That black girl magic.
All this gobbledygook nonsense
right.
I see on a lot of you all social media profiles and in your bios, all my melanated queens.
Right,
and
right.
You know, melanin has this magical property that allows you to, you know, you're conjuring your inner Dr. Frances Cress Welsing or Dr. Neely Fuller, these kind of quasi intellectual left-wing kooks. And I know Frances Cress Welsing has passed on. I don't even know if Dr. Neely Fuller is still alive, but yeah, I've told both sides of the line. And so, yeah, man, you know, you can't talk about the queen, you know, you can't talk about one of our black sisters, one of our black queens, you know. It just goes to show you that the white man and his white female counterpart are the inferior version of man, which is why they can't go into the sun, you see, because the sun, the god of Ra and ancient Kemet and all that crap. Oh yeah. See, I don't know if you know, Chad. I don't know if you heard a lot of the stuff that I'm saying. I'm being silly because I'm having fun with you. But this is what, in fact, passes for intellectual substance
right.
in those circles.
Right.
What we call Black Twitter or these social media ghettos, and not just the Black social media ghettos, but the actual, you know, once
Black
again,
Twitter
we
is
talked
a ghetto.
earlier about this kind of street corner gobbledygook, you know, sort of garbage or rhetoric that was sort of passed down from, you know, folks the likes of Dr. John Henry Clark and Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, all the way down to, you know, the figures that we have today, you know, whether they be sort of like these underground street preachers, street intellectuals, or guys in the mainstream like Cornel West and Michael Eric Dyson and Ta-Nehisi Coates and what have you. So, yeah, this is kind of stuff you get.
No, that's ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that stuck out to me most in what she just said was when she said, you know, take your cigarette smoking, Coke drinking grandmother to the polls, even if she doesn't want to, and even if she doesn't believe in it, and then take her to get McDonald's after she's voted. So not only did you force your grandmother to do something she didn't want to do, but you're also trying to kill her with McDonald's and Coca-Cola and cigarettes. And it's like, and the thing is, like, these, I mean, obviously she's joking, you know what I mean? I mean,
right.
I'm not taking her seriously, but I think that there's truth behind every joke. And the fact of the matter is, these Hollywood elitists types. Which, I mean, I wouldn't consider this woman to be a A-list actor or A-list celebrity. She's probably like, sub-level B-list or D-list, but she still fancies herself to be quite proud of her Hollywood credentials and her, where she's
Calls
stationed
herself
in
a
terms of,
movie star.
right. Yeah, she says she's a movie star. And so it's like these people are like they hold themselves to a certain standard. They don't eat certain things. They, don't fly coach or what have you. But they are all too willing to play a part. You know what I mean? The fact of the matter is how she's talking right now on this stage and how she's talking in the roles that she play. I would venture to say she doesn't talk like that to her friends and family, and to her and business meetings, so on and so forth. But she's willing to kind of play this kind of caricature of a ghetto black woman in order to
Yes.
appeal to a certain demographic, whether it mean
Yes.
whether it be to buy a movie or to vote for a politician, such as what she's doing right here, right now, or whatever the case may be. She's willing to talk about cigarette smoking, Coca-Cola drinking, McDonald's eating, all the things that are killing us, not only as blacks, but as Americans in general. She's willing to peddle all these things and laugh about it and yuck it up. Meanwhile, she's not living that life. She's not talking that way in her real day-to-day life and day-to-day affairs. She's not eating these certain things by her own admission. And so it's like, it's interesting to me, once again, how people don't see the ruse that's going on. A lot of people will watch this video, laugh about it, and say, you know what, I think I do need to go vote. She's right. And they'll vote for the same politicians who are continually to use asinine, dope-headed individuals like Jennifer Lewis to do the stumping for them, election cycle after election cycle after election cycle.
Can I say this real quick, Chad? Just to get serious for a second. I mean, we are serious, and what you just said really hit hard. But listening to you reminded me of something, and that is the complete and utter contempt that, because you said something earlier about what happens when uninformed voters, right, en masse go out and exercise their rights, and how it really affects, right? It affects middle America. It affects, right, small business owners and entrepreneurs, and even the folks who get W-2s, and those kinds of people. You hear all this crap, the way the left plays up all this class warfare, and they talk about how the things like this kind of Marxian claptrap about how the poor, in fact, keep the rich rich, or the richer are getting richer on the backs of the poor. And so in essence, what they're saying is that poor people make rich people rich, completely ignoring the fact that rich people make poor people richer. But they ignore that. You see, they don't care about what these petty socialists, sort of liberal, call it, social engineering, these planned economic measures. They don't care about the consequences, right, of what that does to you and I. Because see, remember, democracy is on the ballot.
Right.
And democracy only exists when they control the reins of government.
Right.
But what they fail to realize is that democracy does not exist in a society where the people don't have the economic vitality necessary, right, to make a voluntary decision. Because in times of grave stress, even economic stress, people look at the overseer, the state, the government, fix the problem.
Yep.
And so if we don't allow the market to do what the market is meant to do or is supposed to do, then you don't have a democracy anyway. I'm hearkening my inner, Hayek and my inner von Mises, just to kind of give people an understanding that you sort of can't have one without the other. You can't have a political democracy. And once again, we don't need to harp on the fact that the United States is a constitutional republic. I think we all understand that, but we don't necessarily have the time to get that qualifier out every time we use the word democracy, but you don't have a political democracy if you do not have economic freedom. Those two things go hand in hand, right? But they don't care about that. They only care about, of course, the fact that they want to be the ones in control. It reminds me of something MSNBC anchor Chris Hayes said in one of his recent shows. He says that if you look at the price of gas, right? You know, when you're paying an extra $1 or so, $2, whatever, however much it may be per gallon for gas than you were 2.5, 3 years ago. But pretty much he says that only a few dollars and some change is what stands between, complete and utter, dissolution, or whether or not we will remain a democracy. So what he's saying, or what he said, is that, hey, stupid voter, the fact that you're paying more for energy, the fact that your grocery bill is higher, right? Your gas bill, your utility bill, everything, right, is more expensive. Your quality of life, the value of your dollar isn't going as far as it used to, thanks to the policies that have been implemented by the Democrat Party machine. Set that aside for a second, because that shouldn't be as important to you, right, as maintaining our democracy.
Yeah.
So suck it up. Don't vote for what is in your best interest, which are things, of course, like inflation in the economy, etc. But keep the Democrats in power, because our democracy is at stake.
Right.
Never mind the fact that they undermine our economy, they undermine free speech. All of these things are essential, right? That is what, in fact, defines a so-called democracy, because we have a citizen government, consent of the governed, right? We, in essence, or in principle, govern ourselves. And so if we don't have the sort of strength to do so, the strength and the wherewithal to walk upright as human beings, then the American experiment is finished.
Exactly. Yep.
It's not about electing Democrats. It's about giving the people what it is that they need in order to walk upright.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't see it that way, because they have complete and utter contempt for John Q. Public, man.
Exactly. Yeah, you're 100%.
That's all I want to say.
No, you hit the nail right on the head.
So came down here to tell you that human beings have two jobs on this planet, and only two. The first one is self-care. Didn't expect that, did you? Well, y'all do me a favor.
I actually forgot about this part.
Start eating healthy. Do me a favor and start moving your body. Do me a favor and continue educating yourself. Do me a favor.
Was she trying to like make up for the whole McDonald's comment when she said that? When she said, "I want y'all to start eating healthy."
Yeah,
she knew that
maybe
she knew that people like me and you would be dissecting this video and like, yeah, look at look at these people and what they often do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're using
their
McDonald's
time comes cheap. Their time comes cheap. Give them some McDonald's, they get their butts up off the couch and go vote. Yeah, they come real cheap.
So she's now trying to, yeah. Okay, kudos to her.
And love each other. Love is the glue that holds us together. See, Val Demings is gonna win Senate. What are you gonna win? See, I go into the souls of people. Like I said, you already know Val's platform. Jennifer Lewis is asking you to take care of yourself. Too many of us are depressed. You know, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I went and got help, y'all. You imagine an alpha woman like me?
I actually honestly, like when we were talking about like mental health earlier and them like everybody trying to get you to like go to betterhelp.com and all this, like I actually literally forgot about this part of the video.
I did too.
So it just, again, it's yet another example of what we were referencing earlier.
You imagine an alpha woman like me saying 3 of the hardest words on planet Earth. Oh, I had to make a call, y'all, and say these 3 words. I need help. I wouldn't be here. You want to know when it started? When I finally came to the moment? It was when I wasn't cast in Waiting to Exhale. I just knew I had the job. Well, I didn't. And sometimes you're not going to get the job. Did I cry? Did I scream? Was I hurt? But I got up, didn't I?
Oh, she did a little kick again.
I got up, didn't I? I'm from Kinloch, Missouri. It sits on the border of Ferguson, Missouri. Even as a little girl, I was warned never to go to Ferguson alone. But Ferguson had a movie theater, and Kinloch did not. So I'd go over there, I'd sneak up in the balcony every Saturday, eat my 25-cent popcorn, and imagine myself in the movies. And now, 68 movies later.
Like, what does that have to do? Like,
450
I just knew a Michael Brown
episodic television shows, 4 Broadway shows, 200 concerts all over the world, including Antarctica. Oh, I'm not the one you want to mess with. Who gonna check me, boo? I'm sure Chief is back there going, ooh, I hope she finished without
like what's her
much.
point though? You know?
Did I let the
Self-indulgent.
racism in Ferguson stop me? You know why I didn't pay no attention to it? Because I wasn't looking for it. Don't wake up looking for dumb shit. You take care of you. Take care of yourselves. It's the people I love. I didn't come down here. I came down here to win. And we're going to win. All right, now, because I am used to standing ovations, I need you to give me one. Come on, get up.
Oh my God.
Hey, wait a minute, y'all. You people down here in the wheelchair, you got to stand up too.
Like, nobody laughed.
That joke didn't land. Right.
You know,
It didn't
I
land like she
did the
thought it would.
hospital audiences, you know, a lot of old people in wheelchairs, and they're being taken care of. And I went in there and did a show for them. Boy, I said that they hollered. So then I knew it wasn't insulting to them, so I did it all the time. Ain't nobody even in a wheelchair. Listen, I'm gonna finish with this. I love you. I love you because I've learned to love myself. I want you to do the same thing. You take care of yourselves. You hear me? Then let me hear you to know what I'm talking about. Go ahead. But you know some of the old folks do.
That was actually very difficult to watch. I felt bad for her watching it. I felt bad for her watching it because it's like basically like you're watching somebody sitting up there almost kind of having a mental breakdown while at the same time constantly reminding themselves like, oh, I'm here to stump for Val Demings. Now I'm going to talk about my Hollywood career. But yeah, I'm here to stump for Val Demings. Now I'm going to talk about like where I grew up, which has nothing to do with the election. Oh, but I'm here to talk about Val Demings. So she's kind of like having this kind of like mental back and forth, and she's doing it on a public stage for all to see. And she's introducing these little antics here and there of like walking around the stage, turning around, pointing at people, doing these little kick flips and all these different things, and cracking jokes that aren't landing. It was just very pathetic to watch. You know what I'm saying? So it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, I would think the same thing if she was stumping for a Republican politician. Doesn't matter to me. It's just interesting to me how these politicians and their staff literally think that this is the way to win elections by bringing these incoherent people who bring no substance, nothing of value to the public discourse. Merely because she was an actress in a couple of movies, that's supposed to be enough to motivate you dumb, ignorant Americans to vote for demagogue politicians who are expanding their own power at the expense of your freedom. What say you?
You know, Chad, I second that. I find it amazing too, considering the way President Trump in 2016 was able to do what he did, right?
Yeah.
In spite of the fact that Hillary Clinton had all of this support from these entertainment bigwigs and LeBron James and Jay-Z and Beyonce and all these folks. There is a very serious disconnect, and I keep hearing people say what was the phrase that folks were throwing around? Yeah, the silent majority, right? It's just like we're all just kind of waiting, just kind of buying our time. We're sitting back in the cut, we're watching and we're observing, and it seems as though very few people in the entertainment space are cognizant of how much they are despised.
Mm-hmm.
And you said something. You said, man, it's like she's almost having like a mental breakdown out there. It's just like, hey, look at me. I'm right. I'm out and I'm campaigning. I'm stomping for Val Demings. But once again, I'm going to talk about myself. I'm here to entertain. In essence, I'm here to sort of. I wouldn't even necessarily say that she's playing the role of the court jester because that's an insult to a court jester.
Right.
What she got up there and did. But I just, the disconnect is because the court jester had an actual vital, serious role,
right,
in what the jester did. But that right there was ridiculous, man.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like, I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, and that's pretty much it, man. And the fact that once again, man, they just think that they can try out these celebrities. We are vastly approaching a moment in this country where, once again, the majority of the electorate don't really care too much for what these people have to say.
Right.
And it's clear, and then you're seeing once again the partisan bias that our entertainers have. And I just also, man, want to say this as an aside because it reminds me of something I heard. A friend of mine on Instagram sent me a reel of some pastor, I want to say in Atlanta, who was from the pulpit, of course, trying to encourage his congregation to go out and vote for Wreck-It Ralph Warnock. And I got that. I think who did I borrow that? I borrowed that from somebody. No, my friend Herschel Walker said. Walker said I call him Wreck-It Ralph. Yeah. And he's in what the guy said from the pulpit. I don't know if you saw this clip. I guess it went viral or whatever. Somebody sent it to me, so I saw it. And he said that this is how dumb Republicans turn to how he flipped the narrative, right? Confession through projection. This is how dumb Republicans think black people are, that they will give you someone who you respect in an attempt to garner your vote. Because, of course, black people only respect athletes and entertainers. So it plays into the whole slave narrative, right? That black people are being exploited for their bodies and all this sort of professorial gobbledygook, because black people are only good for entertaining, right? So I'm sitting back and I'm saying, so don't vote for Herschel Walker because he's not qualified, because he's just a dumb jock. Wait a minute. So Herschel Walker is not an accomplished man. He's just a dumb jock. But when Laura Ingraham told LeBron James to shut up and dribble, not because he was black, it was due to the merit or lack thereof of his argument.
Right.
You're beclowning yourself because you obviously don't understand politics as much as you think you do.
Right.
So maybe you should just stick to dribbling.
Right.
So I'm confused. Once again, it's not about principle. It's about partisanship.
Yeah.
He's a Republican. That's why you're saying that about him.
Right.
And let me also say that, see, I know you and I, Chad, before I even say what I'm about to say, I know you agree with me. And that is, there is nothing inherently dishonorable about being an entertainer,
right,
an actor, right, an athlete, right, and everything. Once again, if you are good at something and it's legal, and as far as the the morality of it, whatever, I know, like for example, being a stripper is legal. Is it moral? Is it immoral? Whatever. Set that aside for a second. But if you're abiding by the law, there's a market for your services, right? You're doing it and you do it well. If whatever for the profession, whatever that you are engaged in, if it commands a decent or a high wage on the labor market, then go with God, right? That's what it means to live in a free country. Right. So to be a professional athlete is just like anything else. Yep. It's a job.
Right.
And to be that's honorable to be an athlete. See, and LeBron James went on this whole thing. I think, was it a documentary? He put out that whole ideal, that whole moniker that he was riding on, this whole more than an athlete thing, right? Because he fashioned himself. He wanted to be sort of like the next Muhammad Ali. Hell, Muhammad Ali wasn't even Muhammad Ali for that matter.
Right.
Because he wasn't particularly articulate. But once again, I'll set Muhammad Ali to the side for a second. But entertainers and sports luminaries play a vital role in keeping the society together. Politics are politics. In politics, there is a lot of acrimony and rancor in our politics. It's always been that way, and it will continue to be that way. But there are certain civil and civic rituals that bind us together as citizens, whether we consider ourselves to be liberal or conservative or on the left or on the political right. We can all sort of gather around the water cooler, or we can all show up at the Super Bowl party, and we set politics aside. But when you make as an athlete, or when you use your platform as an athlete to engage in political proselytizing and demagoguery, regardless if you think you're right or wrong or whatever, you do the people a disservice, regardless of what it is that you're saying, because once again, that's not your role as an athlete, because being an athlete is an honorable profession.
Yeah.
Somehow they have this belief of being an actor and actress is an honorable profession. You actually do the society a lot of good when you just shut up and dribble. Right. But they don't see it that way,
right?
Because they want to be more than athletes, because once again, the left corrupts everything it touches, and they have to use their platforms to once again be more than, because see, I think, to me, and this is just me psychoanalyzing these characters from a distance, because at the same time, we see their opulence, their affluence, we see how they live. And in essence, I think there may be some sort of internal guilt there. So in order to make themselves feel as though they are one of the common folk, they have to bare their soul and tell you what they really think about political issues, to let you know that they actually have feelings, that they actually care, that they are compassionate, and this, that, and the third. But you and I don't give a damn about their money. their wealth, their property, or their celebrity.
Right.
We couldn't care less.
Right.
We're not covetous like that. We don't care. Live your life and enjoy it. But when it comes to you looking down your nose at me from your Brentwood palace, someone like LeBron James, see, that's when we start to have a problem. Because, everything, remember, the left make the personal political, because everything is a political gesture, even things like athletes. Are you familiar with the work of I think he may still even write for I don't even know if he's still alive. If he is, I apologize, but I don't know if you heard of the book $40 Million Slaves.
Yep.
Written by William C. Roden. He was
Yep.
a sports writer for the New York Times. Actually, I own that book. It's somewhere around my house. But yeah, so William C. Roden was pushing forth the narrative that, of course, because of the power dynamic that exists between ownership and athlete, that pretty much today's sports industrial complex is a modern day manifestation of the slave plantation. And so how do athletes reclaim their power and evade and get out of the slave dynamic? Where they have to engage in politics. And when you engage in politics, engaging in politics is never engaging in politics the conservative way. It's only about doing what it is they want you to do, which is, of course, shilling for liberals, shilling for the Democrat Party, because they always wanted Michael Jordan to be political. But Michael Jordan famously said, what? Republicans buy shoes too, because he knew that you don't want me to get involved in politics. You just want me to say what it is you want me to say. Because if I was coming out and if I was endorsing, because remember, there was this famous political race going on. I think it was for the North Carolina Senate or something like that. And everybody wanted Michael Jordan to come out and endorse the Democrat candidate. Or there was another instance at his alma mater. And I know I'm being long-winded. I'm about to pass it back. Michael Jordan's alma mater, the University of North Carolina, there was some situation there with respect to some facility where they wanted it to be an exclusively Black facility, because a Black professor that was extremely popular at the university had passed away, and the student body wanted to create some kind of library or study room. It was something in honor of this African or this Black American professor that had passed away, and the university was pushing back on them against that. Fast forward to today, we have all Black graduations at universities like Harvard, right? But back then, the decision makers at UNC were saying, nah, we don't want to. It's kind of, racism is wrong. No matter why are you trying to create this all Black facility and so on and so forth? No, we don't want that. So they actually reached out to Michael Jordan and said, this is your alma mater. So why don't you lend us a hand in helping us get this building constructed on our college campus? And I think Michael Jordan refused, and he didn't get involved, right? Yeah. Which I think makes Michael Jordan a lot more honorable. But of course, they didn't want that, because they're like, this is a celebrity, Michael Jordan. Just imagine if we had him out here, pushing for it. And of course, it was the 80s, right? It was the decade of Michael Jordan and Bill Cosby and Oprah Winfrey. Right. You had all these examples of Black success, but once again, the activist left of the 1980s. You had figures in pop culture in the late 80s like Whitney Houston, right? I don't know if you all remember this, but the Black, whatever you would want to call them, the Charlemagne, the gods, and these kind of people of today, those types of figures back then, they couldn't stand Whitney Houston. They called her Whitey Houston because she was too much of a Pop-Tart. And they tried to ban her, of course, from the Soul Train Music Awards. So all of the success that we saw being taken advantage of, and that a lot of Black celebrities were enjoying back then, was to the chagrin of the Black activists at the time, because they weren't using their platforms to push these racial justice platitudes, which is what we see a lot of Black athletes doing today.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about that in Uncle Tom Part 3, because a lot of that has been going on throughout the 20th century, in fact, where the NAACP really had their hooks and the kind of influence of a lot of these artists, and encourage them to like politicize their music and to basically support financially the NAACP and other causes. They tried to do it with Nat King Cole. Sorry. I have allergies.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Leaving me on live by myself, man. I'm nervous. I don't know what to say. No, I can't fly without you, Goose.
Sorry, I have allergies and they're getting really bad right now. But yeah, like
Go
so
ahead.
they tried to do the same thing with Nat King Cole, and they were unsuccessful until like 1963, where they finally got him to financially support the March on Washington, where Martin Luther King gave the "I Have a Dream" speech. Of course, he wasn't the sole funder of it, but he was one of the contributors of it, and so. But anyway, that's a different discussion for a different day. But yeah, man, today is election day. Everybody are going to their polls and are voting. Well, I say that, but I know whenever I went to my polling place this morning, there was literally no line. And when I got into the room to vote, there's probably like 2 people in there voting. I was thinking to myself, yes, this is the way it ought to be. Uh, no, because it's like, I mean, again, I don't think like if you are somebody who, again, don't know the role of government, don't know what the policies are, don't know what the candidates stand for, then really you have no business voting. I'm not saying you should live the rest of your life not voting, but what I am saying is you should resolve to be an informed and intentional citizen. And what that means is paying attention to, again, the things that are going on as it relates to taxes, as it relates to domestic policy, which has something to do with you at the municipal, state, and federal level, as it relates to foreign policy, which also has something to do with you, and the security, the longevity of our country. Because again, the thing is like the higher the levels of politics go, the bigger and broader the picture becomes as it relates to time and just immediate effects, if that makes sense. So, for example, the things that I vote for at the municipal level affect me today, right? The things that I vote for at the state level affect me next week, right? Or next year. The things that I vote for at the federal level in terms of, again, as it relates to domestic policy, foreign policy, so on and so forth, these are the things that affect me 10, 13 years from now and affect my children and their children as well. To the extent that our government is constantly overspending, is constantly meddling in affairs in other countries that we have no business meddling in, so on and so forth, we have to bear the brunt of that as American citizens in regard to what's coming out of our paycheck, in regard to what children or wars our children will or will not have to go to, so on and so forth. And so, yes, your voting does matter, but it helps to know the issues and to know where the different candidates stand on the issues. And I say that in all seriousness and all sincerity. Don't vote because, you know, uh, Jennifer, whatever her last name, Lewis, gave a
You keep
speech.
forgetting the name.
Yeah, don't merely vote because she gave a speech at some rally in Florida. Don't vote because Michelle Obama funded uh, these ratchet people to make a video called "No voting, no bucking." You know, don't vote because Martin Lawrence, a comedian who we all used to watch his show in the '90s, teamed up with Michelle Obama and told us that we need to get to the polls and vote. Like, don't vote because Barack Obama is stumping for these retarded politicians in Pennsylvania who can't put a sentence together. Like, don't vote simply because like you're being told to vote by these demagogue politicians and their surrogates to go vote. They're not telling you why. They're not telling you what the substance of anything is. They're just telling you democracy is in trouble, and you're misinformed about what that even means in the first place. And so because of that, you're being alarmed to go vote. But if you're not going to educate yourself, chances are you should stay home. But to the extent that you actually care about the issues and are wanting to look into the issues, not because I'm telling you to do it, but because it's your responsibility to do it, to that extent, do you need to vote? So, any words from you?
Yeah, man. I have a more. I'm with you 100%. I have somewhat of a controversial layer to add on to the voting conversation, but I'll talk to you about that
Go
privately.
ahead.
I'm gonna
Go
get your
ahead. You
take
you
on
brought
that.
you
But
let the cat out of the bag now. You may as well go ahead and spill.
oh man, y'all gonna be mad. Y'all gonna be mad. So, what do you think, man? And ladies, listen to me now. Don't crucify. Don't hate me now. I'm not saying. I just want to know what people think. I want to put it out there, right? Because you know, from an historical perspective, when I say I'm going back now, right? When men were traditionally the ones who did the business of society. And I know people are probably saying, man, there are some levels of tradition that we just quite frankly cannot go back to. And okay, that's fair. Right. And I am not openly advocating. I'm doing a lot of qualifying, but I have to, because this is something that you probably don't hear a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm not advocating for women losing the right to vote. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Uh-oh.
But I just kind of, but it
Uh-oh.
begs the question, right?
Where are you going with this?
Not, not saying that women shouldn't be allowed to vote, but there are consequences, just like it's consequences for young people voting, or people too young, 18. We're talking about 16 at one point. Which, don't worry, that conversation will come back up again in the future, especially when Democrats realize that they don't win all the time. They'll try to change something. But I don't know, man. I mean, like what do you think about women and sort of their right to vote? And is there any kind of consequences that maybe some negative, and they're probably negative consequences for men voting? I get it, right?
Yeah.
But what do you make of that? What do you think about that? And the reason why I ask is because when we're talking about the man's role in the family and the man's role in his community,
Yeah.
and outside the home and everything else, I just wonder what kind of long-term effects does that have on, once again, the size of government, right? I'm thinking of all sorts of budgetary issues and on and on. And I just sort of wonder about
Yeah.
the effect that may have on a society,
Right.
long term, in terms of
Well, a
just
lot of women don't vote. A lot of women choose not to vote.
right.
Like my take on it, on the whole matter of women voting, is I think the more serious question isn't so much whether women should have the right to vote or not. I honestly don't have a problem with women voting. My issue is that we've allowed, and I say allowed, I mean, this is a free country. We have a First Amendment. People can literally use their voice however they want. They can literally engage in whatever movement they want. But I'm saying, as far as like what we've allowed to influence our subconsciousness and our psyche in the way that we see the world as a society, as to what is the Overton window. And so we've allowed inside the Overton window this perception of what family is, of what womanhood is, that is out of step with moral principles, traditional moral principles. And so in the modern framework of what is a woman, of what is a family, again, we're pushing this idea and this concept of a so-called modern family, where that gives credence to and pays homage to and celebrates and glorifies a family being whatever you want it to be. It can be two men and a child. It can be two women and a child. It can be a kind of polygamous entanglement. It can be whatever the situation is, right? And so in the age of so-called gender fluidity, that is the natural conclusion, the ideological conclusion of a lot of what these people were pushing, a lot of what these feminists were pushing. They were advocating for their own worldview, and they were doing so at the expense of the stay-at-home mother. They were doing so at the expense of the homemaker, of the woman who chooses to be a wife, who chooses to submit to her husband. These feminists were basically making fun of these women in a very sophisticated way, and they were doing so from a public platform. They were doing so with media propaganda and television commercials and literature, and they were doing so at our colleges and universities, and they do so to this very day.
Right.
They're driving women to be career women, to be, but the thing is, like, I've yet to meet a woman who is 100% successful at being a full-time mother and a full-time career woman. It's impossible. I've yet to meet a woman who's capable of doing both things. I don't know a
Yeah.
man that's capable of doing both things. The thing is, like, to the extent that you pursue a thing in life, you have to make sacrifices in order to pursue that thing. This is why there's nothing better than the family unit, where you have a father who works and a mother who raises the kids. I was thinking about this the other day. I mean, without my wife, let's say my wife were, to divorce me or to pass away, God forbid, or what have you, and I'm left with 4 kids. That will be an extremely difficult thing to do, because I have to work. I have to make a living. I have to keep a roof over their head. I have to keep clothes on their backs and food on the table. Like, I have to do that. I have to bring these provisions to the home. At the same time, our kids need to be fostered, to be poured into, to be educated, to be nourished and cherished, and to set along the right path by a mothering touch. They need that, right? And so we both play vital roles in the flourishing of our immediate family. And if you take the wife out of the equation, the children and the husband suffers. If you take the husband out of the equation, the wife and the children suffer. Like, all are needed to, again, to basically keep that family going and to raise upright children and to do all the things. And so, again, that family unit that I'm talking about was belittled. It was ostracized. It was demeaned by feminism. And these are the same women and men, mind you, who were trying to push their own worldview. And at the same time that they're pushing their worldview, they're saying, we should, women should vote because their voice matters just as men. And the thing is, like, that kind of confused the conversation, because it's not so much that women couldn't vote. In fact, if you look at before the federal government, before the Supreme Court got involved in women's suffrage, there were women voting. I mean, if you look at voting records, there were women voting before the Supreme Court got involved on the matter. Same thing with the so-called Voting Rights Act. There were Black people voting before the passage of the Voting Rights Act. And so it wasn't a question of, because the thing is, like, voting in elections are controlled by the state, who then delegate that role on down to the municipalities. It's important to understand how voting works in this country. And so, were there improvements made to voting and elections over the past century? I would say yes, there were improvements made, because at the end of the day, your Secretary of State, your politicians who are responsible for conducting elections, at the end of the day, they are human beings, and they do have a political axe to grind. Literally every politician has a political agenda. And to the extent that you're out of step with their political agenda, you become a problem, and therefore they can use a law to squeeze you out and to make it to where you're not able to vote, even though you're perfectly competent, you're perfectly informed, you're perfectly capable of voting. And so, to the extent that that threat exists, obviously we need to ensure that we are making the process as fair as possible. But again, this is a very nuanced and complex situation and conversation to have, that my concern is we haven't been open and honest about the conversation. And so it's not merely a question of should women be able to vote, which I know wasn't your question, but the question isn't so much should women be able to vote. The question is, in what way has modern feminism and the way we think about the roles of men and women in a flourishing society, in what way has that caused a downward trajectory of the society we now inhabit?
Yeah, yep, and how it sort of trickles down, and how the functionality of government is downstream from our conception of family. That's kind of I was how I just pulled up I put up YouTube, so I got my phone out here to the side because I'm speaking to you on my laptop, and I have my phone right here, and I have the live stream up, and I was trying to stay out of the comment section, but I was kind of reading some of the comments from some of the people here, Rick Hempstead, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, Kiana Shaw, Chicken Grease. So I'm reading some of you guys. I'm glad they didn't come for me, like, because you guys understand what I mean, and you just said it, Chad. I mean, I'm not pushing, because I don't have this figured out yet, right? We're just kind of war gaming it in real time. I don't want to scale back and say women shouldn't vote. I'm just was simply putting out the question. What may have been some of the negative sort of ramifications of how we sort of have taken on that enterprise, and especially when you threw feminism in the mix. Definitely, because the government has to come in and, of course, do something to make up for the absence of a husband and the absence of a man, and so and that can of worms has already been opened. So
Yeah.
here we are, right?
It's important to
Operating in
note that, it's important to note that literally every program and idea that's come out of the progressive era, and maybe you should do, a podcast on this soon, but, there was a lot of organizations that came out of the progressive era. There were a lot of movements that came out of the progressive era, and there were a lot of propaganda videos that accompanied the rolling out of these movements, of these programs, so on and so forth. For example, to the extent that they wanted to centralize public education, there were a lot of propaganda videos that came out in the early 1900s to, in a sense, sell the idea of what the future will inhabit for America if we went the way of public education, right?
Yeah.
And I did a live video maybe a month or two ago where I played some of those propaganda videos, and I dissected what the promises were that they were making. Because here's the thing: we have a century of case study. We have a century of basically the effects of the things that they implemented for us to now analyze to see did things happen the way that they promised us that they would happen. And I'm surprised that there aren't more people doing videos like that, where they're digging up in the archives all of these propaganda videos, whether it be for Planned Parenthood, because there were a lot of Negro Project propaganda videos that came out.
Yeah. That's what it was called initially, right? The Negro Project.
It was called that originally. There are a lot of these, making the case for the centralization of public education. There was a lot of them making the case for the Federal Reserve. There's a lot of making the case for, our needing to get involved in the war and, World War II, which I think, we shouldn't have played a part in that war. And that's my own personal opinion. But anyway, you have all these propaganda videos, and you don't see any YouTubers, maybe because there isn't a market for this, maybe there isn't a demand for this, but you don't see people playing these videos play by play, dissecting them, and using the past century or however long since those videos aired to determine, were these social engineers of the progressive era right? Because they're certainly heralded as great people. W.E.B. Du Bois is heralded as a champion of early 20th century civil rights. They glorify him as the founder of the NAACP, even though he wasn't, right? And he started the NAACP with the goal of liberating Black people. Like the literal translation, not the translation, but the acronym stands for the National Advancement for the NAACP, National
Association for the Advancement of Colored People.
Exactly, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. How have Black people advanced under the guidance of the NAACP? Are we asking that question? NAACP or Uncle Tom 2 answers that question. In fact, what Uncle Tom 2 shows is that Black people were advancing, but it had nothing to do with the NAACP. And to the extent that the NAACP finally were able to get their grips on the Black community, you see a downward trajectory, not so much an upward mobility. And so it's important to pay attention, to look at because a lot of these organizations are still around today. We still have the centralization of public education. Planned Parenthood is still kicking. I mean, even though we just had the overthrow of Roe v. Wade with what is it, Dobbs?
Dobbs
decision. You still have the existence of the IWW, the AFL-CIO. You still have, a lot of these organizations that came at the behest of the progressive era. And to the extent that we ignore the promises they made and the net negative results that they had, these organizations will continue to exist. But I say that bearing in mind that I don't think the organizations themselves are America's biggest problem. I think it's important to scrutinize and to objectively dissect such organizations so as to act as a kind of warning board for the next time we get another progressive era, for the next time we get other such organizations and other such people who come along promising us their utopia. We can then look at the past century and say, well, y'all already tried this. What you're proposing now smacks of the same things that we just went through. So no, we're not going to go that way again. We're going to get back to what the founding fathers were talking about when they ratified the Constitution in the late 1700s. That's what we're going to do, because we saw mass improvements from the 1780s to the 1860s and even up until the early 1900s. And it wasn't until the progressive era got their hand on the reins where we began to spiral downward.
Backwards.
So,
even like something as remarkable as the rate of literacy among Blacks in this country. I mean, a greater percentage of Blacks in America were literate than, say, the entire population of Spain at the turn of the 20th century, which is quite amazing, especially, considering the fact that, Spain and other countries like Portugal were, integral in sort of laying the colonial foundation down here in the Western Hemisphere. But, it's amazing that the strides that Black people made, aside from all the garbage that came along in the early 20th century with progressive. You said you were playing a lot of the footage. I've actually seen some of the old archived tests. They used to have to, depending on like the schoolhouse policy or whatever it was, I read some of the educational materials, Chad. I know, you're a heavy researcher. You can probably get your hands on some of these documents. I mean, I was reading some of the just some of the things that 6th and 7th graders were expected to know in order to get promoted to the next grade. And I'm reading this, and I'm a 38-year-old man, and I'm like, dude, I don't know. I mean, for Christ's sake, man, them 7th graders would put me to shame. I mean, we're talking 1880s, 1890s, some of the words and the concepts. So look at these children. This is amazing. Black, white, whatever. But then of course the progressives came along, and it sort of reminds me. People were asking me, Chad, if I may just shamelessly plug real quick. Me, just to give people who are still in the chat just a background. Chad and I, we just kind of met. He just happenstance, random, came across something I may have posted on like Instagram or Reel or something. He contacted me, and we hit it off, and we kind of been home. We've been tight ever since. So, I don't have a huge presence on social media or anything like that. Just got my YouTube channel started recently. Have about maybe 11 or 12 videos recently uploaded. I just last night, as a matter of fact, speaking of the progressive era, I did a whole 90-minute or so long breakdown on the philosophical roots and the philosophical origins of fascism. And it's kind of playing into a lot of what Chad is talking about when he's talking about the early 20th century progressives, because progressivism as an ideology was a part of the whole progressive movement. And I kind of talked about that because people were in the chat asking me if I have a YouTube channel.
Right.
So I just put it in the chat. If you guys didn't see it, it's just Teach 'em Chuck. If you just search up Teach 'em Chuck in YouTube, like it'll probably like pop up or whatever. But yeah, I just did a whole talk where I was speaking about fascism. I just wanted to kind of plug real quick, only because people in the chat were asking if I have any like a YouTube channel on my own or somewhere where I can be found. I just wanted to throw that out there before we wrap up. We've been going for a while, Chad, and you know you got to stop me, bro, because we'll be here all day. So you know, you may want to like wrap it up soon. Maybe we can, you know, reconvene another time. You know, I'm always here at your beckon. You know, so I don't know. It's been what, about 3 hours now? You've been going.
Give or take.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Okay, am I able to? Okay, look at that. Look at that. That was my first time. That was my first time doing something like that. I don't know if people can see it, but I was able to put like your thing on the screen.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Your comment. But anyway, yeah. So I mean that when you sent me that video, man, I definitely was just scratching my head the whole time I watched it. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Anybody, the 24 people in the chat, if you haven't voted yet, before you cast your vote, remember Emmett Till. That's what Jennifer Lewis told you to do.
Right.
Remember Emmett Till. If you don't know Emmett Till, they just recently released the film. The film, what is it called? Till.
Yeah.
So if you have, I haven't seen the movie, man. I hate that torture, that trauma porn. You know, not to say that it's not a good film and it isn't a story like worth telling, but you know, you get so much of that crap, and it's clear that, you know, the entertainment sector has an agenda, and so, you know, there's always those stereotypical black people good, white people bad. So
somebody posted
you kind of get tired of that.
Somebody posted something on IGs. It said, before you vote, go grocery shopping, fill up your car with gas, look at your 401k.
Reminder.
Look at your kids' homework and then go vote. So, and you know, it's so on point because it's, you know, you need to be reminded as to why elections have consequences. I'm gonna surf through some of these comments. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask them now while I still have Chuck, and let's check out our jet. And you know, we'll go ahead and land this plane. Let's see. Whoops. Okay, here we go. Rick says, I almost got canceled in early 2000s. I have to be careful on social media. Early 2000s? What were you using? Xanga? What would early 2000s be? That would be like what? Xanga, MySpace? They weren't censoring like that back then, were they? I don't know.
I don't know, man. I wasn't on social media back then.
Yeah, was that Black Planet back then?
Black Planet, yeah, Black Planet stuff.
Somebody said Du Bois was an elitist and racist. Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right about that. It's funny because, like, on the one hand, he thought very little of black people, but he saw himself as a leader of black people. You know what I'm saying? So it's like that's exactly this kind of Jennifer Lewis-esque vibe that I got, where again, she is demanding you to give her a standing ovation. She's demanding this woman, like, hey, keep that noise down or I'm going to have you removed. She's saying, like, take these pathetic, old, cigarette-smoking, Coca-Cola drinking grannies in your family and, you know, force them to vote even if they don't want to, all these different things. But I don't eat McDonald's. You know what I mean? So these are people, again, celebrities, politicians, whomever, like, they see themselves as the leaders of black people, but they don't necessarily deal with black people on that level like that. And so for me, it's like, I'm not going to claim that I'm in the hood. I'm, you know, this, I'm that. I'm not going to claim to be that person because I'm certainly not. But at the same time, it's like, you know, I don't know. You have to, in a sense, practice what you preach. And I'm practicing values. I'm preaching values. because that's like, I actually live like that. You know what I'm saying? I'm not claiming to be something I'm not, and then at the same time, really not. Not doing
Yeah.
that sense.
Yeah, they have other content. That's why they feel as though they have to be the brain trust to lead they have to be the vanguard of the new, or the tip of the spear, have to be at the tip of the spear of this new sort of future, of course, that they envision.
Right.
The goal, of course, is always to undermine your ability to make your own decisions, because of course, we talk about all the progressives like Dewey and likes of all these other folk. You are of course incapable, because you don't have the requisite knowledge needed to handle such a responsibility. Leave that up to those with the knowledge and understanding to do so.
Exactly.
The specialist, the specialist and what have you, because worst case scenario, where you should be compelled to do whatever the experts tell you to do, because freedom, of course, is too messy.
Right.
Because you allow for freedom, then one individual may seek to undermine the entire plan. Right. So we want to get everyone on sustainable energy. Then we have to make sure that we social engineer the herd into this future, because one person with an idea, comes forth, and if there's a market demand for it, if the people want it, then we won't go there or where they want us to go. We might go here.
Right.
Yep. So freedom is not allowed. I'm gonna just jump. Let me ask, because Chad, I gotta, my kids got home not too long ago.
Okay.
And I locked my door. They were just knocking on my door. I just ignored them.
Yeah.
So they're probably wondering like, what the heck's going on? Dad locked us out of the room. We just wanted to come say hi. So I'm gonna go tend to the family a little bit. I just want to address one thing before I go. My man Rick Hempstead said I go against Afrocentrics. That's a very interesting comment. I know me and Chad, we can really get into that, the whole the bogus sort of push of Afrocentricity. Thanks to the likes of quacks like Malana Karanga and others. But someone said something, asked me, what about Gnosticism and Marxism? And man, that's a real heavy one right there. I don't know if that person saw me speaking or saw me saying something on another in another video or something, upload or podcast about Gnosticism and Marxism. Is one of those heavy things that's a bit, it's kind of difficult to like sum up, in a kind of put in a nutshell. But to put it in a nutshell, to address the question, Marx took some of the sort of ancient pagan folklore, and he used it to create what he referred to, because you have to understand, Marx believed that he had history down to a science, right? It's what he called his historicism. And he used Hegel's philosophy of dialectics to explain the passage of history, or the passage of time. And he who is in the know, right, as a human being, is funny, because people talk about, well, Marxism hinges on atheism, secularism is total abandonment of God, while at the same time, and we see, like, of course, Darwin was popular, prevalent around the same time as Marx. But people say, well, if we are all this stardust and we are all the result of a cosmic accident, then what separates man from beast? But Marx, and he would, of course, build off Hegel, but according to Marx, man is unique from the animal, in a sense that man can almost humanitize in like an eschatological, am I saying the word right? Eschatology, in that sense, kind of bring manna, or bring heaven down to earth by way of his own actions, because you have to see yourself as a human being in the thing that you create. So man can dictate his own reality, thus becoming the driving force of history, which would lead to a better future. Ultimately, the utopia that would, of course, signify the end of the historical process. So it probably sounded kind of weird and abstract and goofy, but that's how Marx writes. That's how these people, and it's difficult once again to just kind of sum up, but it all builds on, once again, Hegel, who of course was heavily influenced by a form of paganism known as Hermeticism, and it all kind of goes in that way where, you know, man supplants God and becomes like the creator of his own reality, the creator of his own universe. So I just want to like address that question.
Cool. Good summary.
Yeah.
Good summary.
All right, man.
All right, peace.
Yeah. All right, man. I'll check you out later, man.
All right, take care.
Yep.
So we got Kevin Briggins here. He says, man, you guys still going? I mean, well, so
yeah.
So,
and Rick, one more thing, I'm gonna go. I'll stop. Yeah, Rick, you're right, man. Marx was a lazy philosopher because he was, you know, it was just the same soup, just reheated, right? He just borrowed a lot of things from stuff that other folks had already said. You're right, man. But y'all boys take care, man. Y'all,
right.
Peace out.
Take
Have
care.
fun.
All right.
All right, man.
Yeah, I guess. So, I mean, we both tend to be a little long-winded. So, I guess, you know, what do you do? Let's see here. Okay. Rick says about 100 years. I'm not sure what that's in reference to. I guess we kind of skimp past that. God works in mysterious ways. Indeed, he does. Teach him, Chuck. Actually, that's my comment. That's if you guys are interested in following my guest today. His name is Charles Littleton. He goes by Chuck. And you can find him on IG at Teach him Chuck, the way it's spelled here, as well as YouTube. So, Cheek and Grease, I just found your channels. I shared your channel earlier. Cool. So yeah, definitely share his stuff. Rick says he subbed to Chuck. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you for that. Maybe you should be a moderator next time. Overlay is working. Great. Cool. I'm glad to hear it. Let's see here. Chad, don't forget to do a leg kick. You will not see me doing a leg kick like Jennifer Lewis did. I mean, that was just absurd. I mean, I literally seen girls do that on the sidelines at football games. So that appeared to me what she was trying to do. Yeah. So when I was playing football back in high school, I literally saw the cheerleaders doing that on the sidelines. I would think to myself, wow, that's impressive. You shouldn't be doing that at the age of 70. I'm sorry, but you shouldn't. I mean, it's cool that you can, but you should probably tone it down when you're at such a respectable establishment as a political rally trying to get people to vote for you. I don't want to see you do a kickflip or whatever that is. I just want to hear why you think you should come all the way down here to Florida from Hollywood to get us to vote for this candidate. That's what I want to hear. I don't want to see you kick the air. Let's see here. Till there was Judge Floyd. I'm not sure what that was in reference to. When people say the party switch, what do they mean? It's a good question, stimulated students. Are you asking like rhetorically, kind of setting it up to give an answer? I'm curious to know what you think they mean, or if you're genuinely asking me what I think they mean. Let's see here. Rick, I go against Afrocentrics, as do I. Let's see here. Kiana says, I got a jet. Thanks for the wonderful conversation. Have a wonderful evening. You do the same, Kiana. You remember that movie I was the extra in? She definitely set up her her bona fides that way. It was kind of cringy to watch. Michelle Littleton, I guess this is Chuck's wife. I'm sorry, but teach him Chuck. Can you check your text, please? Uh, he again tends to be long-winded, but a lot of what, in fact, most of what he has to say is very interesting and thought-provoking. So definitely a great guy to listen to for sure. I'm sure I'm wondering if you get the brunt of that at home. Let's see here. Okay, it looks like here we go. Chad, do you think the presidential election was stolen? Uh, I do. I do think it was stolen, and the reason I think it was stolen was because it was very obvious how it was trending on the night of the election. I stayed up and watched it as I did in 2016 during the election between Hillary and Trump, and again, staying up and watching it, like the key swing states that everybody had their eye on that would be the determining factor for the 2020 election. Very strangely, like they were not, the numbers were not coming in like they traditionally would have come in for previous elections by that time. And there was just a lot of funny business. And then I just remember, like late in the night, Fox News and the people over at Fox News began to act very strange, and then they just called it for Biden. And it was almost as if like they were sleeper cells who just all of a sudden flipped at the night of the election. And it was funny that all like in the days and weeks leading up to the election, they kept talking about how this is a safe and secure election, how, there is no suspicions of voter fraud. So they were basically reassuring the general public that there's no suspicion of voter fraud, while at the same time, or when in reality, it's like, what, like, how do you know? Like, I get that you are a journalist. I get that you hold a public stage, that it's your job to, in a sense, broadcast the news, but that doesn't give you some kind of, looking glass, some kind of silver ball to know everything that's going on around the country in terms of who is and who isn't influencing elections or stealing elections or, you know, collecting, voter harvesting or ballot harvesting or whatever the case may be. A lot of that stuff was going on, but the media, rather than treating those claims objectively and fairly, they downplayed them and dismissed them. And they did this leading up to the election. And so they were trying to reassure you that, oh, this is the safest election in years. And like, that's what they tried to reassure us. And so it was almost as if they were kind of building up for the inevitable, and the inevitable being, of course, that there was an agenda, there was a plan to steal the election. And I mean, if you think that this doesn't happen, or this can't happen in the United States, while at the same time you do believe that it's capable of happening in third world countries, you do believe that it's capable of happening, overseas, I think you're naive. And I'm not saying you, Bree. I'm saying, like, to the extent that people say, like, oh, that could never happen in America. Like, you have too much faith in our politicians, in our mainstream media, if you think that they're not capable of influencing or stealing an election. I absolutely believe that they pulled it off. But again, this kind of goes to show how there is a kind of globalist agenda, and they're willing to pull off whatever means necessary to accomplish that goal. I haven't done, let's see here. For some reason, I guess it can't put the whole. Well, I guess it does. The whole comment is on here. It says I haven't done thorough research. From my research on Strom Thurmond, a Southern Democrat who is widely known to have been racist, was advocating for state rights. Democrats aren't for that today. That was why he did a 24-hour filibuster on the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So what we cover in Uncle Tom Part 1, the first film, is that the narrative that a lot of political pundits push is that there was a party switch, and they embody the evidence of the so-called switch in one person, that person being Strom Thurmond. But the reality is, to the extent that you had a lot of these Democrats who were genuine racists, none of them switched over to the Republican Party. In fact, the overwhelming majority of them died Democrats. And so I don't think it's a question of, I honestly don't think that we're asking the right question when it comes to whether or not the party switched. The question we should be asking, rather, was how did what caused the political parties to shift in terms of their approach to certain questions on social issues, right? Because if you look at the Republican Party in the latter half of the 19th century and in the early part of the 20th century, their whole thing was emancipation, for one, and then Reconstruction downstream of emancipation. So, in other words, they wanted to see to it that the slaves were freed, and then subsequent of that, they wanted to see to it that these recently freed slaves were set on the right track for success. And they did this not by giving them handouts, but rather by establishing funds for schools, one-room schoolhouses to go up. You had a lot of these teachers who volunteered or became teachers for these former slaves to teach them how to read, to teach them how to basically to educate them, really. And so you saw a lot of these Reconstruction measures that were being implemented. Some of them I agree with, others of them I do not. And so, again, the whole kind of theory behind the kind of help that the Republican Party was offering to recently freed slaves was that of giving you the tools by which to lift yourself up by your own bootstraps, right? Now, that's important to note for the point that I'm about to make, or that I'm going to later make. The kind of help, once again, that Republicans were offering were to give you the tools by which to lift yourself up by your own bootstraps. It's this old concept of teaching a man to fish. The kind of help that the Democrats would later offer would not be to teach the man to fish, but rather to give men fish. So they're two completely different models of so-called helping. The Democrats were against the Reconstruction. In fact, they wanted to roll back a lot of the gains and the measures that were being made at the behest of Reconstruction. You of course had the birth of the Ku Klux Klan that came under the umbrella of the Democrat Party. You had the birth of the Anti-Defamation League, which is a so-called anti-Semitic kind of mafia that exists. The Democrat Party invented that, which is strange. Why would the same party that create the Anti-Defamation League, which is very pro, Israel, which is very pro Jew, why would that same party then go and start the KKK? You know what I mean? So it's interesting that that's under the same umbrella. But not only that, the individuals who started the NAACP were Democrats. And again, the NAACP stands for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. It wasn't started by Republicans. It was started by Democrats. So the Democrat Party started the KKK, the Anti-Defamation League, and the NAACP. That's interesting to note, right? The reason that's interesting to note is because it wasn't so much that you had these kind of vast disconnects of political opinion under the umbrella of a singular party. It's rather the case that the Democrat Party was indeed infiltrated by communists, because the Democrat Party was this kind of free-for-all party where all these different factions of political ideology could basically, it was a struggle for the direction in which the party would go, and in the end, the Marxists won. If you look at the latter pages of the Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx plainly says that the communists align themselves with the Democrat parties of all the nations of the world. He literally said that. And so, again, like clockwork, in the early 1900s, that's exactly what the communists did. They came to America and they infiltrated the Democrat Party in this country. And so they understood that to the extent that you have black people and white people in this country, that is a point of tension that can be pressed upon, that can be antagonized in such a way to where when you can build animosity, because again, a lot of the relations between blacks and whites were improving by the 1920s, right? Like blacks and whites were getting along. They were shopping at each other's establishments. They were even going to church together in many cases. Again, a history that's not talked about. But what the communists resolved to do was to reopen those wounds, was to recreate tension between black and white. And they were able to successfully do just that. And what they sought to do under the guise and the behest of the Democrat Party was to put forth politicians who would act as these kind of individuals who had the answer to kind of heal the racial wounds of our country. And so that gives you the perception as if there was a party switch, when in reality there wasn't no party switch. Again, if you want to ask yourself the question as to whether the party switch or not, when it comes to the question of race, all you have to do is look at the philosophy that guided Reconstruction versus the philosophy that drove the kind of so-called help, whether it be welfare, whether it be civil rights or what have you, that came later on. And you'll see a striking difference between the two philosophies. So no, the parties didn't switch at all. I hope all that made sense. I know it's kind of all over the place with my answer. Let's see if I got any more comments. Federalists like states' right as well. Not entirely. The Federalist Papers, like, they were advocating for a strong federal government that would be the kind of referee for the states. And so, yes, I guess to an extent they supported states' rights, but they felt that they were more in favor of the federal government, hence the title Federalists. So I tend to be more on the side of Thomas Jefferson when it comes to the philosophies, the rivaling philosophies of the founding fathers. Let's see here. Kathy asked stimulated students, have you watched the UT documentary? I highly recommend them, as do I, of course. Rick says Republicans were abolitionists and women's rights advocates. Stimulated student says that was why he did a 24-hour filibuster on the Civil Rights Act of 1964. As I say always, anybody who watched me know what I'm about to say. But the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was not good law. It just wasn't. It was unconstitutional law. It gave the government, the federal government, the right to voice itself, to thrust itself, I should say, in the affairs of private-owned companies. Now, if the government wants to dictate and regulate the working conditions of the, I don't know, the post office or some kind of government building, have at it, right? But keep your damn hands off my small business. That's what I say. Again, even though you had state mandated segregation laws prior to the 1960s, you still had regular, everyday, average Joe, entrepreneurial, small business owners who were defying those laws and were allowing Black people to shop at their establishments anyway. Were allowing Black people to come through the front door anyway, to shop alongside white customers anyway. They were defying those laws much the same as you saw people defying mask mandates, small businesses, whether they be gyms, whether they be hair salons, whether they be restaurants and bars, who were defying the mask mandates at the height of COVID-19 in this country. Here in Dallas, our own Democrat Judge Clay Jenkins issued a mandate, unconstitutionally might I add, that if you own a small business in the city of Dallas, or the county of Dallas rather, that you have to force your patrons to wear a mask upon entering your establishment. And if you don't, then the business will be fined. And a lot of these businesses started putting these signs on their door saying, please wear a mask when you come into our establishment, because if you don't, we will get fined. So you had a lot of people doing that, but at the same time, you had a lot of people who refused to put the sign on their door and refused to force their customers to wear masks. They were defying those rules. Now, are they the first people ever in history to defy government mandates? Absolutely not. The same thing were going on at the height of Jim Crow. And to the extent that you had Blacks and whites doing business with each other, defying these laws, at the same time you had those same people, without the interference, without the guidance and the influence of the communists, deciding to come together and repeal those laws. And those laws were falling off the books at the municipal level, at the state level, so on and so forth. So these Jim Crow laws were falling off the books without the help of the NAACP, without the help of Martin Luther King, without the help of the Civil Rights Movement. And so all that to say what? All that to say that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was absolutely 100% not only unnecessary, but also unconstitutional. Because all it managed to do was to, under the guise of defining unconstitutional, well, I say defying, I should say. What the Civil Rights Act of 1964 managed to do was, under the guise of defying state-mandated segregation laws, they sought to bypass the state and go directly down to the individual and infringe upon the individual's personal rights. That's what it did. So it was even more, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was even more unconstitutional, in my opinion, than the laws they hoped to repeal. I hope that made sense. I really do. Let's see here. Somebody said, hi, Chad. Do you have a website? Let's see here. Do you have a website or somewhere to send you an email or message? I do have a website. It's simply chadojackson.com. chadojackson.com. There is a contact tab at chadojackson.com, where if you fill it out, there's a message body where you can put whatever it is you want to say or ask or what have you. And I'll, those come directly to me, so I'll be able to get back to you. Let's see. WX Watcher says, the late Max Heller, former mayor of Greenville, South Carolina, also a Holocaust survivor, was a Democrat opposed to big government. He believed people would and should help one another as needed. I agree. Amen to that. Rick says some Jews of the ADL lists as well. Jim Crow as well. A unity of strong states. Cheek and Grease. What's your take on the Hatch Act? I'm gonna actually make a video about that, so that's forthcoming. And then Spanish Ball FM says thanks. All right, so I think that will do it, folks. I've been on here long enough. I'm tired. I'm weary. I'm hungry. All the things. And yeah, there was another video that I wanted to react to. The debate between Michael Eric Dyson and Judge Joe Brown, friend of mine. But I'm going to save that for later. It's an hour and a half long, and I'm not about that right now. So anyway, love you all. God bless. Happy election day, all that good stuff. Take care.